wonder though. I'll give it like 4 or 5 minutes, but So what build are you currently playing? Let's start with that.
So I have been playing a Inquisitor build that started as a Penance Brand Ignite Elementalist. The problem with that is that the inbuilt mechanics of Ignite are really bad in a world where Explodey Chest is very easy to craft. Because you have to kill an enemy, leave its corpse, proliferate the Ignite from the corpse. And the problem that I ran into with that was, number one, Penance Brand basically hits everything in the pack anyway, and number two, the Ignite Prolif mechanic is just worse Explodey Chest. So I switched to an Elementalist hit-based Penance Brand. And then, as I started to push content, do 100% Delirious maps, I realized that Elementalist's immunity being tied to golems is a really good way to die, because when if your golems dies, you're no longer completely elemental ailment immune, you get frozen, and then you get dead. So I ended up, I was literally wearing a headhunter to keep my golems alive. And I realized if I'm going to be doing that, I might as well just make a build that doesn't use golems at all. So I switched to Inquisitor, and that was the best decision I made in terms of that build.
Wait, you started Inquisitor, went to Elementalist, and switched back to Inquisitor?
Started Elementalist, ended up on Inquisitor. Yeah.
Okay, no, you planned originally and then went to Elementalist during the planning phase before the build.
Yes.
Makes sense.
And it was a great decision. I ended up going Pious Path and Inevitable Judgment because it's really hard to get pen on a converted Explodey Chest. So just ignore resistances.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the great reasons Inquisitor is so good, because it's a global penetration that counts for all hits, not just spells or attacks, but just everything that you do.
Yep. And now I'm working on gear for my next build. It is going to be a cast on crit strike volatile dead necromancer.
Cast on crit style?
No, cast on crit strike.
Okay, strike. I was thinking about doing like some sort of memes earlier this league, because I found a cost priest. I was actually thinking, but that would be a pipe dream because cast on crit needs a really high hit rate in order to be good. But I was thinking Frostblades cast on crit on an occultist for some reason. That I've always wanted to play Frostblades on an occultist, because occultist doesn't only have the chaos synergy but also the cold synergy. But it just feels so ham-fisted that it's like more of a meme build that I would be doing.
I could see it, but it would be weird if you did something like Hawa Frostblades and used Call to convert over from lightning to cold. Not necessarily very SSF friendly, though.
Well, yeah, chat asks, how did the golems die? Because I was also wondering how the golems... I thought the golems are very survivable. Is it just pushing ahead in content and the golems were low level on the gems still?
So even at a level 20 golem, they were just getting shredded by things like Legion or Kosis in 100% delirious content.
Yeah, okay, 100% delirious content is...
yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, typically in something like a tier 16 map, their health didn't even noticeably move. Maybe it would if a Mariketh Legion got on one of them, but aside of that, it was totally fine. And once I put Purifying Flame into the build to give them extra regen, no problem there. But 100% delirious content, things hit much, much harder, and especially Kosis seemed very good at killing them. I'm not quite sure why. I'd guess it has something to do with the fact that he typically does Fizz and Chaos damage, and I didn't have any minion resists, so they were likely very vulnerable to the Chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always in builds where you only use the golems for their added effects rather than as your main thing. Then you don't invest anything into minion survivability, or at least you don't want to. You can avoid it. And there's some really, really big clusters on the tree. I can't remember all the names, but is it Indomitable Army or whatever, that the one close to Sion that gives so much fizz mitigation and resists?
That sounds right.
Mm.
And so without those things, it felt pretty lackluster. And my original idea for the Elementalist had been to abuse the Shapers. So I was going to ignite with Shaper of Flame, deal cold damage. I was actually full cold conversion ignite, and using cold conduction to shock with Shaper of Winter for freezing things, and using Blast Freeze with effective non-damaging ailments. This all fell apart though when I actually tried it in game, because I realized the issue with Blast Freeze is for the freeze to proliferate, things have to actually be alive.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And when you kill them, they shatter, and then there's no corpse on the ground that can
yeah,
proliferate the freeze. That's always the problem with freeze prolif. Always
yep.
has been.
And so I discarded all of that, and then I ended up just going with the 60% AoE for the Explodey chest, which, I mean, yeah, it felt nice, but also it felt largely irrelevant after the AoE I could get on the tree and the Headhunter buffs, as opposed to just going Inquisitor and ignoring resistances entirely on the Explodey chest.
Yeah, the freeze thing, that reminds me of back in the day when I started playing and watching streams at some point. I think during 2015, I watched Project PT, where he was doing a freeze prolif build with the old Shock Nova. And old Shock Nova, compared to the new one, worked a little bit different, because old Shock Nova had a dead center where you wouldn't do damage in the center. So you would basically freeze a monster and then stand next to that frozen monster, have the monster in the dead ring so you wouldn't be able to kill it, but everything that would walk up to you would get freeze prolift from that monster, and you'd be able to kill it with your Shock Nova. That was pretty
That
cool.
is, yeah, that's a cool build. My first build ever in Path of Exile was actually a freeze build. It was specifically an Ice Shot Ranger. And this was way back. There were no ascendancies, no leagues even. This was pretty early in the open beta. And it was an Ice Shot Ranger. My whole goal was, okay, I figured out that frozen enemies don't have the ability to attack me. Can I hit everything hard enough to make sure it freezes? And the answer was, yes, I can. And then, how do I live? Well, Volpact back then was a very, very good way to live. It did lock you out of life flasks effectively, because this is really old
It locked
Volpact.
you out of life flask?
Yes, it reduced the recovery rate from life flasks. I forget the exact wording,
That must have
but
been like really long time ago.
yes,
Because
this
I
was
don't remember
before.
that.
Yeah, this was before the first league was ever added, even.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I was able to permafreeze everything, including things like Piety, because Piety was, in fact, the final boss of the game.
Ah, that time, yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't play back then.
it wasn't a good build by today's standards, but it worked at the time.
Yeah, I mean, most things that you'd play back then, I just watched a video of Ziggy D explaining how to map an endgame from 2013, and it was just so essentially different from how the general pace at which the game was played was just so different.
Yeah, it was so much slower back then. And also, fighting out of sync was one of the hardest things in terms of limiting factors on build design. Now it's crashing because too much loot is generated.
Yeah. Yeah, the desyncing was a big thing where you really, that was an additional layer of skill that as a player you kind of needed to tell when you could be out of sync and use the resync with the server command accordingly, or
Yep.
use abilities that would force a resync. Like, I think certain movement abilities did.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Although I know Leap Slam was notorious for being the worst movement skill when it came to desync.
Yeah, yeah, and Cyclone.
Yep.
Which is funny because that problem came back recently when they removed the stun immunity from Cyclone. And now you're
Oh,
getting
interesting.
stunned with Cyclone and you're desyncing. I hear
Huh.
that. I haven't tried it myself, but I hear that from a lot of people that Cyclone does desync you now when you get stunned.
I will have to find out about that because I'm about to be playing a Cyclone build, which it's not going to be stun immune, but it is going to have 6k life, so not many things should stun me. But still, there's going to be things that are going to stun me, and it's going to be interesting to see if I desync. And, well, I guess I might have to put complete stun immunity into my build if that is a problem.
Never bad to have complete stun immunity. So I was recently playing, or this past week, in Badger's Private League, which was a you might have heard of it, but I'm just quickly gonna explain it for people in the audience who may not know what it was. And it's a private league that was going on for 1 week. Now the minimum duration for private leagues is 10 days, but 7 days was the set limit in which you could gain points or gather points as a team. And everyone in the league, we had I think around 1,200, 1,300 people, got randomized into one of 4 teams, and every team had to score boss kills, player levels, delve depth, and unique item completion. Unique item completion was centralized per team on the team leader. And based on that, via a point system, a winner was determined. And of course, I have to thank everyone for randomizing me onto the winning team, because I had nothing to do with the team winning. I feel I played hard, but what I wanted to say is my build was a Purifying Flame Minor Saboteur, and my first time playing that build, so I may have done some things right, I may have done some things wrong, but what I really realized is that it was so much better once I transitioned it to low life, because of the stun immunity and the slightly higher life pool. It was just, as a life-based version of the build, it was very, very hard to get enough life without dropping anything that I really wanted on the tree. Like, you kind of feel forced to travel to aggro and phase aggro, even though it's sort of point inefficient, but in the end, obviously, for the enormous boost that you gain out of aggro and phase aggro, it's worth it. But there's just so many little things that you want to pick up that I ended up with like 4,400 life, and with that, it was not enough to not get one-shot in higher red maps, especially once there's the damage mods on there. And if you didn't get one-shot, you were very likely to get stunned anyway, so you would die in the next hit after getting stunned. And just transitioning it to low life and using Chayula for stun immunity. I mean, I had a presence, but I think Eye of Chayula would have been just fine. Just that stun immunity allows you to outplay the enemies much, much better. So getting stun immunity in other builds is also, in every build, is pretty good.
For sure. It's one of the things that I have kind of this checklist of things to add to almost every build I play. And stun immunity, it's lower on that list, but it's definitely on that list.
Once you get ailment immunity.
Near the top of the list is things like ailment immunity, also max res, because max res and Fizz taken as these days is one of the few truly effective layers of defense. There's relatively few things that completely negate or counter it, and there's a lot of stuff that will kill you if you don't have it.
Yeah, and ailment immunity is so, I wouldn't want to say easy, but it's much more available nowadays to get than it was a year or two ago.
Definitely. It's the most available it's been since Harvest League, because you can actually get it, or get part of it on jewels. So there's implicit chance to avoid there's chance to avoid stun, which will help if you want to be stun immune. Then there's chance to avoid freeze, chill, ignite, shock. If you combine all 4, you get 10% chance to avoid ailments, which you can combine with other rolls, things like Shaper Boots, to get 100%.
Yeah. Shaper Boots, where you also get up to 25 from the bench craft on gloves and helmet, and then there's an unavailable craft for up to 35 on the chest piece, which is a prefix, so you can't always fit it in. But it's just from the crafts that you can get, plus Anointing Crystal Skin, that's already 100% if you roll them perfectly.
Yep.
You get 25, 25, 35, and the 15 from Crystal Skin. But if you pick Crystal Skin in the tree, you can get I guess you can get 5% for one ailment while pathing to the node.
Yeah, and there's also Thick Skin, which a lot of builds, especially builds on the Shadow and Ranger side of a tree, will be taking anyway for the life, where you can get an extra 20% from filling that out total.
Yeah, that's easily overlooked.
It's overlooked, and if you're on that side of a tree, you should probably be getting Wind Dancer anyway, so it's right there, and it's a great layer of defense to help with your ailment immunity. The only time it's not really worth it is if you're something like a Pathfinder or Raider who's getting the immunity anyway, and the life notes themselves are only, okay.
But you're so starved for life that you take them anyway.
I think what I do personally at that point is I would take Thick Skin itself for the 2 points, I would skip the 2 below it, and I would invest in Fettle Clusters.
Yeah. Fettle Clusters are pretty good. I think I'll just, I mean, at this point, I'm not sure when BalorMage will arrive, so I think I'll just put the windows in, the cameras into the windows, and we'll just see what we can do without Balor. Maybe we can continue this very interesting conversation while the podcast is officially running.
Oh, defenses in Path of Exile and integrating them into build is one of my favorite topics.
It's also really important nowadays.
Yep, more important than ever before. I would say, in terms of common mistakes I see when people make builds, the biggest one is looking at all the damage numbers, looking at all the damage mods on items. How can I scale my damage? And really focusing on that, and not looking at the how do I scale my defenses part. When I make a build, I always start with, let's say the concept, let's take my most recent character that I finished, the Penance Brand Inquisitor. So, all right, I'm playing Penance Brand. I need certain things to make sure Penance Brand functions mechanically, like I need Holy Conquest on a cluster. I want 3 Remarkable on a cluster, or on 3 clusters. After that, what are my defenses? What defensive layers can I integrate? How can I integrate them? And then what does that leave me left for the items? Okay, it takes up, for example, my Anoint. I used Hardened Scars there. And
Hardened Scars is so good.
Yeah, because if I'm playing a very fast build made for mapping, I'm not really going to have time to shield charge, and I'm not really going to want to shield charge in a lot of cases. So I add Hardened Scars, and now I've just got Fortify. I can add a Taste of Hate, base Fizz for Penance Brand. It scales my damage, and it scales my defense. I was going to wear a shield anyway, so that I could meet the mana reservation for my auras, because I was running double 50% auras in Hatred and Zealotry, so I can add max res to the shield, which also scales the defense from Taste of Hate. And so all of my choices were defense focused early on in the build. Then I went to, okay, well, now what about for damage? Because, for example, my weapon, there's no defensive slots on my weapon. It's all just about damage. But it doesn't have to have defensive mods on the weapon.
I'm trying. I'm hard pressed to think of any defensive mods that you can spawn on a rare weapon. I guess resists. You could have resists on there. I always craft resists on my items in SSF, especially Gauntlet, and then when you do vendor crafted ones, then obviously you have a free suffix for the resist if you really need it.
I can think of one defensive mod on a weapon, which would be Fortify on melee move skill hit on, for example, a 2-handed sword.
Right.
They are pretty rare and pretty specific to certain builds.
I'm gonna try and put on a trailer or some gameplay in the background. Actually, let me just put on your gameplay. Why not? Wait, that's not. Aha, here, there we go. Inquisitor Penance Brand. Nice. Yeah, I mean that approach would have probably helped me a lot with the Saboteur. Seeing that was my first softcore league in a long time. When I played it, I just went all out on damage, prioritized that over survivability. But I've been thinking a little bit about how to adapt the league or the build as a hardcore league starter, possibly. I'm not sure about league starter, but like one of my starter builds, possibly not the very first starter, but like the second build that you pull up once you get the first one in maps, and you get some basic requirements, and you need something that can kill bosses efficiently at a higher tier. And I was thinking maybe working agnostic and mind over matter into the build, but then these mana items are so hard to get in Path of Exile. I talked about it earlier with BalorMage, like Foible is tier 1 rarity, and sometimes you don't see it in an entire league, and I can't even remember when I last saw a Cloak of Defiance in my game.
Well, if Harvest stays, you don't need Cloak of Defiance, luckily.
You don't need it, but it's still a very good chess piece.
Yeah, but it's very, very easy to force a Mind Over Matter chess piece from Shaper base.
Yeah.
So at least with Harvest, there are alternatives. Now, should Harvest be deleted from the game? In my opinion, yes, that's for different reasons.
Maybe wait for a moment. Maybe Balor comes with that topic, because I think he has a strong opinion on that one as well.
Yeah. In terms of miners, so the original core of the build that I used for my first Purifying Flame miner was actually a hardcore character. It was a hardcore miner that SK Cloudy played in, oh gosh, I think it was Legion League or something. It was, no, never mind, it wasn't Legion. I think it must have been Blight, because that's when mines were reworked. And I made my first Purifying Flame miner build in Blight League. From there, I adapted things and I worked on kind of fine-tuning it. I played a life-based version that used a bow in Metamorph League, and that was my league starter. And I found out from that I hate playing life-based miners. There's always just this really big awkwardness in terms of scaling the defenses. Now, ultimately, using a bow and quiver, I did end up scaling the defenses to a point where I was happy with it. I had about 8,000 max life. I had Calm's Hard On to help boost the life up.
Yeah, I was like, you can't reach that amount of life without Calms in that build.
And so I was really happy with the defenses there, but that was definitely later on in the process. Then in Harvest League, I started a miner again, and I hated the life-based portion again. Ended up making Ball Lightning because Ball Lightning got accidentally overbuffed in the changes in Harvest. And so the damage from that build was just absurd. And once I transitioned to low life, everything was beautiful. And of course, in Heist, I started yet another miner. This time, I did not make the mistake of the past. I started as Poison Blade Vortex Assassin. And then I just completely pivoted my build, did a full respec, and went low life miner the second I started with mines, and that felt way better to me.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah. I was thinking maybe to mitigate the problem, but then obviously I can't refund into Saboteur. I was thinking playing Toxic Rain Mines on Occultist, because I've been, I mean, you can tell probably I'm a big fan of Occultist. But the problem with Toxic Rain on Occultist over playing it on a Ranger or Shadow Ascendancy is that you don't really get that much attack speed, and Toxic Rain scales really well with attack speed.
Yeah, which in that sense, doing Toxic Rain Mines would help because you negate the attack speed issue entirely.
Well, you turn it into a throw speed issue, but yeah.
Throw speed, honestly, isn't that bad.
It's easier to get.
Yeah, a little harder in SSF, but as long as you have a Zeal Belt and crafted suffixes on weapon and helmet, that takes care of a lot of your throw speed issues. Especially if you use charged mines and swift assembly.
Yeah. Charged mines gets throwing speed? I didn't even look at it that precisely.
Throwing speed per frenzy charge. And yeah, you'll be able to get at least 4 if you're something like Occultist Toxic Rain Mines, because you'll have, the curve over to the good mine nodes, which are right by the frenzy charge.
Oh, I see a random BalorMage in chat. Damn. I think we're gonna get BalorMage on the show, guys. Are you hyped? Everyone, a random BalorMage appears. Look here, BalorMage. I got a big ginger root that you can brew yourself a ginger tea with to wake up. Do you like ginger?
Yes. In fact, I had ginger tea yesterday.
Yeah. It's amazing. Very
Because
refreshing.
I hadn't been feeling too well when I woke up, and ginger tea is great for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Okay, well we'll give Balor 5 minutes. That's great. Yeah. So throwing speed on weapons and on build. And where else was it? On charged mines, on Swift?
Yes, and on charged mines and on Swift. Also,
else. I think I guess there's an unveiled thing on Amulet or something like that.
Yeah, I think Amulet as well. So you could use Amulet in place of or in addition to, depending on what you need affix wise. In general, I tend not to have
a rare amulet.
Yeah. I tend to just use Chiula because all of my miners, except for the one, just immediately jump to low life.
Yeah. Yeah, low life is so good. You get so much out of it.
Yeah, especially for something like Purifying Flame that scales off of base Fizz. Because you can really run any auras you want. You can, well, I mean, Wrath, not really, but you can run Anger and...
Could if you want it.
If you want.
If you had a Watcher's Eye with physical as extra lightning, well affected by Wrath, you could.
Yeah, then you can. And in fact, that's why I ran Anger on the last version of Purifying Flame Mines that I played, just because I had the Watcher's Eye with the Fizz as extra. And at that point, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And then Zealotry is good, Hatred is good.
Oh, Hatred is so good because when you crit, like, the moment I switched from Zealotry, like the first time I went low life, I was like, okay, let's try Zealotry. And then when I wasn't really that happy, or when I decided, well, it doesn't really give me that much benefit because Purifying Flame obviously already spawns Consecrated Ground, so you don't really need Zealotry. I decided Hatred, and I instantly, the moment I made the switch, I loved it. Because everything obviously was frozen and shattered, and it was a lot less problematic in Delve.
It's especially good in Delve. What I also really, really liked is the combination of Frost Shield, which I was manually casting, and Divergent Berserking, which ended up feeling really good defensive-wise.
What was that second thing? Diversion of what?
Berserking. So I'd use Chainbreaker.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I'd just have Berserk as an offensive-defensive layer.
Yeah, I think Octavian also did that in his Explosive Trapper build.
Yep, it's a really good setup. And if you're an SSF, if you can get the Chainbreaker, honestly, you don't need the damage from Divergent Berserk. Just put any Berserk in your build, and you'll have the awesome defensive power of a second Fortify layer. One note that it is a little bit restrictive on the mana, especially now that there isn't the built-in reservation. So I don't know if in SSF the Amulet craft for chance to refund mana would actually be worthwhile. On the other hand, what I did is I used a Clarity Watcher's Eye.
Which one? the mana recovery. Yeah.
It meant that I couldn't actually lay out all of my mines and start a detonation chain. I'd have to leave one or two. But if I left one or two, I had a really good chance of sustaining my mana and just going through the cycle. So my setup was less about just bursting a boss 100 to 0 and more about sustained DPS. It still had some burst potential. It could, for example, insta-kill Conquerors, but it wouldn't do something like insta-kill the final phase of Cirrus. It would usually take 2 cycles.
That's still okay.
Yeah.
Seeing that Cirrus is like fairly mechanical, and if you play it correctly, there's no harm in having it go on a little bit longer. I mean, in the last phase, a lot of random stuff can happen, but for the most part, if you're experienced with the fight, you can keep it under control.
Yeah, and with the defensive layers that I had, I could just drop Frost Shield and eat a beam to the face, because why not at that point? Also, while I do have the faster casting in my gloves there for the portal skill, it wasn't solely for that. It was to meet the 10 activations per brand for Penance Brand.
What kind of gloves are we talking about? Kalisa's Grace? Faster casting gloves? No.
No. On my Penance Brand character, I have faster casting gloves. They're, if I
Oh,
remember
okay,
correctly,
Shaper or Elder
yeah,
or something like that.
Shaper.
Influence gloves, Shaper.
Yep.
Yeah, Shaper is faster casting and faster prod you can roll. Because I remember people crafting the Winter Orb gloves on Shaper bases.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very, very greedy with my Penance Brand character because Harvest makes me greedy, and I realized that what I can do is perfectly balance a character to have exactly everything I need in POB, and then just print the item into Path of Exile and wear it. So I ended up with only tier 2 faster casting because I used a slightly lower item level base. There wasn't a duplicated base. I was using Sork Gloves with the Temple mod for hits against chilled enemies, and then tier 1 life. There was someone who was just printing them out for about 2.5x each. And I bought that. Then I did imprint, add influence until I hit Shaper, just reverted it to clean the influence off if I didn't get what I wanted. Then I regaled, hit a resist, which is fine because I could fix it later, and it happened to actually be high enough tier that I could just use it. And from there, I crafted Avoid Ailment as the last suffix. And then wait, no, I didn't craft Avoid Ailment. That's a different pair of gloves. I put some suffix that I forget now. And then I put a life prefix and crafted conversion on it.
Nice. Version. Needed that on my gloves. I quickly wanted to say something that seems slightly unrelated now, but I wanted to close the loop back to where we were talking about how good low life is and the mana thing, which that's a point I didn't make, was that low life is actually easier in SSF than the mana because it doesn't require you to craft a chest piece or find a foible. Well, I guess low life requires you kind of to go Chiula, but you
Yeah,
don't need the upgraded version necessarily, and Chevron's wrappings are so easy to farm in Scriptorium in comparison to randomly getting a cloak, because I don't know, is there even a diff card set for cloak? Not one that you can target farm as far as I know.
I don't think there is one.
Cloak is insanely rare, for me at least. I
Yeah,
haven't seen one drop in ages. Although it was the first chest piece that I 6-linked in the game ever.
nice.
I actually bought one that I wanted to link for profit. I was like, they're only like 2x. That must have been somewhere in early 2015. So I league started in HC and got some stuff together. And when I was at 2x, I just bought like a cloak. I was like, okay, let's 6-socket and attempt to link it and then just sell it for profit. And then I 6-linked it in like 42 fuse or something like that and ended up selling it for 18 exalted orbs or something like that at the time.
Nice. I think the first item that I 6-linked, because for a long time I bought items that were pre-6-linked just to not have to deal with the massive amount of RNG. Because back in the
Yeah.
day, if you wanted to 6-link something, what you had to do is you had to roll it until it was 4-linked, and then 20% quality it, and hope it goes to 5, then 20% quality it, and hope it goes to 6. Because
What?
every time you applied a fusing, it would remove all quality on the item.
Yeah, but why did you have to 4-link it before and then apply quality? Did
Just
that
to,
did that raise the chance of hitting a 5-link when it
yes,
was 4-link before? Because I didn't
yes.
know that. I knew that that quality was important and that you added it every time because it consumed the quality when you used fusings. But I didn't know that the links before that were important.
Yeah, so it had a higher chance. Now, it was still prohibitively expensive, and it probably was straight up better to just quality it every time, but you'd spend, I'd like to say, about 20x on average to 6-link something back then. And if you had qualityed it on every single fuse, that cost would have jumped to 40 or 60x.
I was
Hello
here the
there.
whole.
Just sneaking
Hello.
in. He was never
No,
gone. He was always here.
no
Just
one will notice.
Have you found the correct portal?
I have no idea how I slept through my alarm, but I did. But
well,
more
Balor, you can
important,
directly go ahead and tell us what was the last build you played and where did you play it and why is it the Badgers Private League?
yeah, I'm pretty sure the Badger Private League is the reason I'm so tired. I didn't sleep much. Poison Blade Vortex is insanely powerful. That's what I was playing. I had day 2 gear forever. 3 of my pieces I picked up off the ground before I even entered maps, and I was doing fully juiced tier 15 Legion farming dunes and unlocking all of them and not really dying, and I didn't realize how powerful it would be on what is literally day 2 gear. It was able to do everything.
Yeah, that's
I'm actually
why.
super impressed.
Yeah, that's why Poison Blade Vortex is one of my favorite builds to start and then transition into something else, because I just don't have to invest in it. I grab whatever really, and then I farm currency and play the build that I plan to play in endgame.
I basically I got a 6-linked carcass jack, and that was basically the only real upgrade I made past day 2 of the league. That was it. There were still people on like the last day of the league trying to be like, oh, I still need org this and remove that and remove this and stuff in global chat, and I'm like, I'm wearing the same gear I was wearing on like day 2. I'm level 96 doing fully juiced delirium orbed tier 15 triple legion things in day 2 gear. I'm like, it's fine.
I mean, Terrence, the well-known German racer, Terrence _ plays a lot of Poison Blade Vortex Assassin. And even in hardcore, I think he got like a really high placement in Endless Delve with it. It's just such a potent build.
I've never felt that strong on day 2 gear. That's like I'm so weakly geared on that character, and it was just still able to do everything. So
Plague Bearer is such a massive boost early on. Did that still factor into how strong you felt in day 2? Or is that already where it's irrelevant?
I mean, I honestly don't know. I never took the time to even plug it into Path of Building. I have no idea why I felt so strong. I just know it could do everything.
Obliteration, probably.
Yeah, they really helped a lot.
Obliterations are insane, yeah.
I've been meaning
to... please.
And so easy to farm obliterations. Like they just... I think I personally dropped about 7 of them during the week. As well as separately 4 or 5 cards, like 4 or 5 sets of cards. From day 2 onwards, we were just mass corrupting them. The whole team was just mass corrupting them, trying to get whatever the corruptions are.
Is there a chaos dot multi or something like that?
There's poison damage, power charge on crit, frenzy charge on kill, I believe, and
Unholy Might on kill, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Unholy Might on kill is insane.
Although also the chaos cluster jewels super easy to craft. Like I made myself a 3-node 8-point cluster by the end of day 2. I just made it super easy.
I use those as an example in a video on crafting as an example because they're so easy that I figure almost anyone can do it.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to revisit Occultist because the node got buffed. The obliteration explosions on Occultist, the Profane Bloom explosions that's what they called. They went up from 25 to 40%. And then that plus 2 ones, 70%. I mean, no, not really. That's not how it works, right?
Nope, that is how it works for those.
For those, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think what I would probably do is I'd take Chilling Presence. I think is it Chilling Presence or Frigid Wake?
The Chilling Presence is a cluster jewel thing.
Okay.
Frigid Wake is probably the Occultist thing.
Yeah, Frigid Wake then. for chilling enemies to cause them to deal less damage to you, and freeze chill immunity. And then I would go Malediction because Malediction is required. You kind of you don't play a cultist without it. And from there, it's down to pops or Explodey Chest. If I have Explodey Chest, I'd skip the pops and probably go with the Power Charge investment stuff for the AoE and all that. And otherwise, I would go with the pops. Although stun immunity is also a thing. You could just abuse ES to have stun immunity on a cultist.
Yeah, if you just get like one ES regen craft or something like that.
Yep.
But you were talking about specifically Poison BB now, right? Or
Oh, I just general occultist builds.
general occultist build. Because not every build benefits from Malediction, right?
I think almost every, if not every build does.
I feel like if you're not picking Malediction and Profane Bloom, you've made a mistake making an occultist. Like, if you're not taking those two things, there's probably a better class. Those are like the reasons.
Yeah. Especially early league, those are the reasons. Later on, I do think you can drop Profane Bloom for a well-scaled Explodey Chest and take something like the Power Charge investment to give Explodey Chest AoE, or take something like Stun Immunity. But early on, yeah, definitely. You start those two and you build your build around that. And you always take Malediction.
Really Wait, quickly update me. What is Malediction right now? Because it used to be the non-chaos is extra chaos, but they took that away, right? It's one additional curse and
it was the one additional curse and Malediction. Malediction is the enemies that you've cursed 10% reduced damage done and increased damage taken off the top of my head.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, that one. Yeah.
And then the node also comes with curse effect. Which is like, honestly, if I'm not putting at least 2 or 3 curses on, I'm not making an occultist.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's just quickly pointing that out in chat. The misconception that those are not connected anymore. They're separate 2-pointers, like Tenkiei said. It's not a precondition anymore to pick Profane Bloom for Malediction. I knew that, but I also remembered that Malediction used to give you non-chaos as extra chaos, and that they took that away.
Yeah. Probably because there were very few ways to actually properly leverage it, since it was a on-kill effect.
Yeah, it was basically just for Blade Vortex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't rely on the wiki. There's not that many people who update it, sadly.
The wiki hasn't been reliable in 5 years. I don't even open it.
Well, I open the articles that I know have the right information because it didn't change in 5 years. Like, every time I'm not sure anymore what the minimum item level is for a flask to roll adrenaline, I look it up, and every time I'm surprised that you can already roll adrenaline at eye level 5, and I'm like, wow, okay, so already a flask that you drop in ledge could roll adrenaline.
Isn't that also why races do the things the wrong way around? Like, they go and open the tunnel and then come back to go get the flask to turn it into a higher level so they can roll stuff on it.
You're talking about the Tidal Island flask?
Yeah.
Tidal Island flask caps out at item level 4. You can't get it higher than eye level 4.
Does it?
Yeah. But eye level 4 is what you need for freeze and chill remove, so that's what I sometimes do. I don't hand it in FHC because I want freeze and chill, and if you hand it in right after you got it, you usually only level 3, and then it's eye level 3, and then you can only roll, resists and stun recovery, eye level 3. So, yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, then, almost 1 hour into the podcast, should we address the first talking point now that we know a little bit where we come from and what we do in Path of Exile? 2 months into the league, are you still enjoying the additions to the Atlas? Are they still fun and interesting or feel worth your time? Who wants to go first?
I'll let Balor go first here.
So, yes, some of them die off incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
Like, there's basically only, I think, 3 zones that I even care about, maybe 4. And now I do feel like I'm limited to just those 3 or 4 zones worth of maps. And
So
whatever they shuffle into them.
Valdos for leveling with Harbingers, Highwark for harvesting, then the one with the Legions.
Legion farming.
And which is the
And
fourth
then I
one?
think
Because on that one you could be flexible, I think. Like the other ones are the first 3 are indisputably good. But
honestly,
then,
I'd have to open up the client to remember.
last one-
but
you don't have the client open yet?
no.
Yeah, I guess the last one would be Glennock Cairns for the Beyond
Alva?
Abuse there.
Beyond Abuse, okay. I really like the
yeah.
Alva stuff in Glenna.
Yeah. The Alva stuff is just sort of like, it was already so easy to make any temple you wanted.
Oh, but the temples are significantly better. Like the average room rank or room tier is way higher with those things.
Right, but I
Unfinished
only
temple.
care about the 2 types of corruption rooms.
Yeah,
And it was already piss easy to make those.
I wouldn't say piss easy. It still had RNG. You weren't guaranteed to get it to rank 3, even if you did it with the right tactic. Like you still could fail to get sent into the right room. And the fact is, which you're probably not taking into account right now, is that you never get sent into a tier 3 room. So if you upgrade more rooms to tier 3, you're also more likely to hit the room tier 3 that you want to hit tier 3. Because you're not getting sent back into the tier 3 rooms.
I know all the math. Like I wrote the guide on how to do it, but it was just really easy. Like I would say, knowing what you're doing, 70% of your temples had a corruption room if you did it right.
One of the 2.
That was beforehand.
Yeah, but one of the 2 corruption rooms. Or okay.
Yeah. And like, how many pieces of gear or gems do you really have that you needed that for? So that really hasn't excited me at all, because like I could already get all the corruptions I ever needed. Now it's just a matter of, I have to like buy things to double corrupt because there's too many of those around. So just
Yeah, I tend to buy things to double corrupt anyway. So overall, I like having more options for it. I also like that I can get more sacrifice chambers because those tend to be very easy money, especially early league when people don't tend to use the vials as much.
It's fair. People don't like using the vials.
Yeah, if you're gambling for a headhunter with your sack chamber, you are doing it wrong and you are costing yourself exalts. Most leagues, I did the math out, you will make 2 headhunters worth of profit in exalts upgrading a vial every single time.
Nice.
That's with generous odds for the headhunter. You could easily make far more than that.
See, for me in SSF, I feel like I can never have enough good Alva temples. There's always like something small that I would like to double corrupt. Like early on, of course, I don't have the 2020 gems to use the gem corruption room properly. There's always something that I want to corrupt, that I want to sacrifice. And since they changed the Alva temple or the tier 3 room rewards, I also really enjoy the tier 3 Tormented Spirit room and the tier 3 Atlas room that adds drops to every single architect in the temple. Because it may seem insignificant if you just look at the drop from one architect, but if you have if you have every room at least a rank 1 room instead of an unupgraded halls or whatever, and every room has an architect, and every architect drops mapping currency and is, in the best case scenario, possessed by a tormented, what is it, the name? Embezzler, the currency one. You get some good stuff, potentially. But yeah, not necessarily stuff that you would care about in a trade league after week 1 or 2.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff, even week 1, loses its value very quickly in trade league these days.
Yeah. Feels like day 4, and then you just don't care anymore.
Yeah. And for some things, I was taking them off my filter day 2.
It just
The old filter discussion. Balor always tells me about how he's looking to take more and more things off his filter earlier and earlier every league.
Yep, and I mean, just using the gameplay on screen of moment as an example, if my filter was much stricter than it is now, I probably would never crash. If it was any less strict, I'd crash every single map. And this isn't even 100% delirious.
Is this that's only 60, is it?
Yeah, 60 to 80, depending on which map I had. And the main reason I don't go to 100 is it adds so much looting time and doubles my map crashes.
Okay. Have you tried the minimizing hidden loot thing?
Yeah, I just really don't like picking everything up after I finish the map. But I do.
No. So I nearly doubled my performance in like fractured and delirious maps by completely minimizing all of the non-shown loot. It turns out PoE is drawing all of your loot filter headers as loot drops, whether it's hidden or not.
Oh.
And so just minimizing all the hidden loot like cuts down on all of the drawing it has to do by a very significant amount. And that really helps.
I will have to try that. Yeah.
And it's been like that forever. And the option to do it all at once has existed in Filterblade forever, and just no one knew. It's just in one of the like quick actions in advanced or something. You can just minimize all hidden loot, and it all becomes the absolute minimum size. And that helps so much.
Didn't you also say something last time about like using a filter as the baseline for the hidden loot? Where
it lets you doing something like that lets you play slight shenanigans, like having certain pieces of gear not minimized, and then when you press Alt, it becomes really easy to see those things. I went as far as making all of the hidden loot actually transparent 100%, but then I could specifically pick things and make them not transparent, and suddenly I've got 2 loot filters in 1 loot filter. So I'd be able to push a button and like pick up armor scraps off the ground if I wanted to. Realistically, I've only used it for portal scrolls for when I forget portal scrolls, but there are a lot of other options.
Yeah, I should definitely do that for portal scrolls as well, because there are characters where I forget to have a portal gem, and there's 2 things that I cannot forget on any character or I run into trouble. If I forget a portal gem, I'm going to be stuck in a map with no portal scrolls in my inventory. And if I forget corrupting blood immunity, I'm just going to fall over dead because I don't look at that debuff, because all of my builds tend to have it almost immediately, or just natural immunity. Yeah, for me personally, and engaging with the Atlas, it's a bit weird because I go through cycles with my builds. So when I was playing the Penance Brand Inquisitor and doing a lot of mapping on it, I was definitely engaging with especially Valda's Rest and a little of the Legion stuff, a little of the Beyond stuff. When I was farming Harvest Crafts, I was engaging with that. But right now, I'm crafting gear for a new build. So I'm not actually mapping at all, and I'm not engaging with the Atlas in any way. And that's just perfectly normal for me. And so I would say overall they're fun. Overall they are worth interacting with. But I also know that I'm not necessarily the best example because I don't engage with the game in a way that is similar to most people.
Just a second, camera's going a bit blurry. I'm switching to US Central because that's usually in the middle for everyone and looks better. All right.
Audio's back.
Yeah. Should be only gone for maybe half a second or so. But when we're talking about the additions to the Atlas, like we just said, there's like 4 regions that are key, and everything else is a little bit lame. But there's more additions, right? There's the new gameplay loop of the boss encounters. And how do you feel about that now that you've not only had the actual league start, at least Balor and I, but we've also done another league start in a private league? How do you think it holds up with repeated playthroughs that you have to progress a separate progression now on top of the normal Watchstone progression? Does it really feel like an alternative progression? Because it's like both are mandatory, right? For me, it sometimes feels a little bit like they are both stalling each other. So it's buying the game more time before it expires, so to say, which is a good thing, of course. It helps with the longevity, but at the same time, I sometimes feel like, well, if I do this, then I don't do that. If I do that, then I don't do this. Like, as in, I feel like I could be faster progressing through my Watchstones if I didn't have to do the Maven progression. But if I don't do the Maven progression, I'm missing out on the Atlas passes, which obviously I don't want to miss out on. So, where do you stand on that?
I kind of just ignore Maven. That's not to say that I don't do it. It's just that I progressed normally, as I normally would, and just did Maven fights whenever they appeared.
Mm-hmm.
And that still got me the first like 3 sets of passes in every zone pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
And then it was a 1-week race, so I didn't worry about it. But the first time around, mine was very scuffed because I didn't realize how it worked. And I did 2 of the fights in the first zone ever, and then moved on with my Atlas progression and didn't come back to that region. The region was done for a very long time to unlock Maven. Because if you don't do the very first fight in the very first place you spawn her, you can't spawn her in a bunch in the rest of the Atlas.
Oh.
So I was in like late red maps with no Maven encounters and no Atlas passives and
In terms of progression for me, one thing that I did a lot of was I heavily focused on certain regions that I knew had things I wanted. And it let me actually ignore map progression a lot more than I might have otherwise, because I still don't have all of my Watchstones from Conquerors. I will finish this league without having all of my Watchstones from Conquerors, because I got the Watchstones from the alternative system of Maven fights.
Right.
I don't think the system itself holds up very much for me in terms of repeat uses, where I did the 10-way fights to unlock the passives everyone on the Atlas. And I did a couple in Valdo's Rest early on when it was 4 or 5x. Actually, it was up to almost 10x at one point for the Valdo's Rest Watchstones because everyone was trying to roll auspicious. Since then, I have not done a single 10-way fight because I don't want to do 10 random maps for rewards that are incredibly mediocre at best.
Even if they were good rewards, I like running 1 or 2 specific maps over and over and over again.
I like running multiple maps. I just don't like going up to 10. In most of my regions, I'm sitting at about 7. So 7 is about the limit of the maps I will naturally run and enjoy the progression of, unless the rewards are good enough, which the rewards from things like the Hidden, the Feared, etc., they are definitely good enough, and I've definitely set aside entire days just to farm those.
I mean, I think that's okay because the 10-way fights were pretty rewarding early. Like if you were just getting Guardian maps and stuff out of them in the first few days, you can do a 10-way fight and drop 4 Guardian maps to go fight. They're significantly more rewarding when that stuff matters in the first few days of a league. Okay with it? There's no world in which once I'm done setting up, I actually run 10 different maps. Like, you'd be lucky if there's 10 maps on the Atlas I want to run total, let alone in one zone. Like, I just don't. I'm very single track down. These are the maps I like running, and then they're the only ones I want to run. Other
So the
maps are just
incentive
pain in the
provided
ass.
to rotate through different maps via the Maven invitation system for 10 boss fights is not enough incentive for you to deviate from your 1 to 2 map plan.
No, and even if it was, that would mean that I would be forcing myself into unfun content that I don't want to do. And I'd be hating it. Glad it's not good enough, because I don't feel like I'm missing out by not doing it.
I don't think it'd be possible for it to be good enough. It might
I don't
be.
either.
Yeah. For an average player, I think it very well might be possible. But for anyone who can do things like set up sextants and run fractured maps, I don't see it being possible, because if the rewards are equal to running fractured maps, then all of a sudden, everything it offers is just going to have no value anymore.
Yeah.
And as a system that's good for most people, good as an early game progression system, I'm okay with it. I won't necessarily engage with the 10 boss aspect very much myself, but I don't find it to be, offensive that it's in the game or annoying and detrimental. It's okay. I'll use it early, I'll progress it, and then I'll forget about it until the next league.
And honestly, probably the more casual you are, the more useful that is. Like the less efficient you are with your time, the more rewarding that is in comparison to what you're normally doing.
Definitely.
So if you're out here doing fully sextanted, fully scarabed, fully juiced up tier 15 and tier 16 things with delirium on them, or legion farming or whatever, your time has become a lot more valuable, and doing 10 different maps is now not efficient. But if you were just a mapper, just mapping around the place, those 10-way fights would be a spike in your money, right? Like that would be
Definitely.
Excellent. It's time to do this again. So that's probably a good thing. That's probably one of the few things they've done that's better this league, that's better for casual people than it is for like no life degenerates like myself. Because they made a lot of changes that benefit me over casual people. Way too many, by the way. But
yes, and
that happened a lot. And then, so at least this is one that goes in, I think maybe goes in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
How necessary are the 10 way boss encounters in order to access Maven? Assuming that you're not going to buy the Maven splinters, you get a lot of the Maven splinters from the special Maven encounters, right? From the hidden, feared, and stuff. You get like huge stacks of them.
So I would say the 10-way fights are detrimental if your goal is to farm Maven, because they take much longer than something like the hidden, and they have significantly less splinters as a reward.
Yeah.
I would agree. Sense. Doing the Breachstone ones are by far the quickest.
Yep.
Like the 4 Breachstones. Oh.
Yeah, that's what I used for a lot of my farming.
Yeah. So quick to run.
And then the feared is the most rewarding, but only if you have multiple accounts to basically clone your investment on something like the Cortex.
Yep.
Would you mind explaining that real quick?
Sure. So let's say you want to...
Multi-accounts, so you're multi-boxing on the same... Okay.
Not really multi-boxing in this case, you're just bringing other accounts into the instance, similar to how if you bring multiple accounts into the instance and you capture a beast, then everyone gets the beast. If multiple accounts are in the instance when the Maven witnesses something like the Cortex, everyone gets credit for that, and then from each individual atlas, you would open up the feared, go in on the account, start it, leave or die, and then kill it on your main character. So you buy one Cortex, which last I checked was about 3x, and everything else is, let's just say, 2x for the Uber Elder set and 1x for the Adziri set and the Chiula combined. So you're spending 6x, and you are getting 6 feared as opposed to spending 6x and getting 1 feared.
Wait, but then you need 5 accounts on top.
Yes.
Yep.
The problem is in softcore trade, because people are using multiple accounts, it's not really economically feasible to solo farm a feared anymore.
You don't necessarily need to multi-box it yourself. You can always do rotas with other people.
Yeah.
Where everyone brings one set and you just do one, do all split and do your own, finished fight. Do another round on someone else's and then back again. But that's the way to make profit on it, because the people doing that's what they're doing. They're either doing it with friends or they're multi-boxing it themselves to get 6 times the amount of rewards. I actually hate that as a gameplay thing.
I hate that it forces you into that.
Yeah.
So here's the other option, though. The other option is it only works for the map owner. And if that's the case, any group play or any support gets shafted. And I don't like that either. Like, I want to be able to take a support with me and have them also progress their Atlas and get the fights. But as soon as you do that, you unlock the option to abuse it in this way, which I don't like.
So would you say a fair middle ground of that would be for everything except the special encounters, the witnessing works exactly as it does now? And that for the special encounters, only the map owner gets witnessed. So that way, if you're playing in a group or playing with a support, you would have to give them a feared set to unlock their feared for the Atlas passives. But for everyone else, doing just the 10 ways or whatever, you can share it with your friends, you can make a public party, whatever you want.
I think so. That would be better. Expensive stuff, the big ticket items. That would make sense. It would have to be all the big ticket ones, though, like all the ones from the center Atlas.
Yeah, basically. Exactly. That the center ones would follow slightly different rules, but everything else would be shared.
I feel like that would be okay. Because it would still let people play in groups and have a support and not leave that support totally shafted at the end of the week when they want to go their own way. They'd have progression done and everything. But I feel like that would be fine, because all you would do with your support is at some point during the week, you would do one set of those things on their Atlas. And as long as everything else was progressed, it would be fine. And that would straight up halt the people doing like 5 multi-box fights.
I also think it would make doing it solo more worthwhile, because one thing about the Path of Exile economy is the more available an item is, the less value it has. So because you can take one set for the feared and split it into 6 feared, right now it is not profitable to do that unless you split it into 6. Whereas if it was 1 for 1 and that's all you could ever do, most likely we'd see something like Bottled Faith is 12 exalts instead of it being around 3 exalts. And so all of a sudden, there's an incentive, if you have a support, to bring that support and do their own set, unless you're just an asshole and not nice to your supports, in which case, play solo.
Yep.
But you want to do the feared multiple times, because with that support, it's going to be really safe and easy for you. You can still bring them into the fight. They can still do it with you. In terms of killing the things, it's just only one reward, and then you split it, and you do 2 sets or 5 sets or whatever, and all of a sudden you're making more money, as opposed to you treat it as you're writing this off for the cost of unlocking the Atlas.
Yeah. I like that. I'd be a fan of that. I wonder if there's anything else that should apply to. I can't really think of anything. That seems like the most important thing. Like, there's nothing else that you share that's this important. Like, yeah, you share beasts and stuff, and that makes like beast rotas a thing. But like, I'm fine with all of that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
I still think the difference between doing rotas and not doing rotas on beasts specifically would be way too big. I don't
it
being
is.
able to
It's
multiply it just like that with the player number.
the difference is a mirror a week versus a mirror a day, if we're talking about the highest end.
Yeah.
But
But
it doesn't devalue beasts to the point where it's not worth running beast at all if you're a normal player. It might not be worth running, say, a gilded bestiary scarab, but it is totally worth running all of your Einhar missions, and you still get value from it. So I'm more okay with
yeah,
that system staying as is, even with the very blatant abuses.
It's the highest number of beasts that you have seen in one map.
I don't know, but I do know that a friend saw 3 of the split beasts and captured 3 of the split beasts in the same map.
in one map.
Yes, in one
Nice.
map. And
I-
he did have 6 accounts in the map for beasts.
Oh, okay. That's
that's
crazy.
18.
So 18.
Yeah.
Now, I was asking because I ran a moon temple in Badger's private league where for some reason it spawned 35 beasts in total. It was in the region with the beast stuff though, but it's a lot.
It's
Yeah.
Trin's End, I think.
Yeah,
I
it
think.
might be turns end, yeah.
Yeah, Tyrn's End, if you use the mission, it has a chance to replace basically everything with beasts. I never got that to proc, but I also got bored of beast farming to proc it, for an example, after something like 12 maps. So
Farming just not my thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I just play around with those things. I'm not all about efficiency, but I'm just coming from that SSF place. I just use my resources when I have them instead of thinking, hey, what would be the best thing to do, and then just buying the resources for that. I'm just like, hey, what do I have today? Oh, let's use that and get rid of that. Use my beast scarabs, use my Einar missions, and run them in that region. And when I'm done with that, then I move on and I do something else somewhere else. I don't know. I just don't really like trading for things. We'll go into the private league stuff a little bit later, maybe still more, or maybe that's a topic that we'll have to skip because of the time restrictions. But one thing I really quickly wanted to say is also like, yeah, do really, I'm not that vocal about things in global or trade chat. I just really don't like acquiring things from other people. I don't like the process. Even in the private league where you basically got handouts, I feel like a lot of people got way more out of that than I did because other people were louder to scream in global chat, hey, I need this, hey, I need that. Does anyone have this? Does anyone have that? And instead of, me just asking for things, which a couple days into the league, I was a lot more comfortable doing that. So I actually was able to progress a little bit better then, but I just, instead of asking for things, I just wait until I get them myself. I just set that as a goal. Because I always feel like I'd rather play the game than typing in chat. Sorry,
Well, like what that thought process, like doing that, all that does is hurt your own team, right? Like that's not good.
Yeah, I realize that.
That's actually anti-helpful.
Well, I don't know. I think in the early couple days, a lot of people were doing better things than what I was doing with the things that they were given from the team. So it's okay that they had a higher priority than I did.
So in terms of normal path of exile, I am the absolute extreme opposite of that, where I buy everything. If it is not significantly more economical for me to craft or farm it myself, I'm just going to buy it. And I'm not going to think twice about that.
Yeah. I actually, I hate trading and I still buy everything. Like I hate trading, but you know what I hate more than trading? Picking up gear off the floor. Quicker I can hide all that on my filter, the better.
Yep. I don't hate trading. I enjoy trading because, well, mostly because of the economic advantage that I am able to generate by leveraging it. So a good example of this is I got a cluster jewel, a megalomaniac that I got via live search because I was considering playing a build. And I was like, I'm going to make a bunch of live searches for megalomaniacs that might be good. If I did not trade, my odds of getting this item were 0. It has on it.
You're not getting that.
Fettle, Sublime Sensation, Cooked Alive. There's no cluster with those 3 specific nodes on the market in softcore, hardcore, standard hardcore.
Quickly looking up what Cooked Alive is. Enemies ignited by you have -10 to fire resist.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not, those are good nodes. It's not like particularly insane, although it's really good to have those 3 together. But when you're after a very specific 3, it doesn't matter what 3 it is, they become incredibly rare if you're after a megalomaniac with those on them. Like, that's, if you're like, I need this exact 3, that's very, very, very rare.
Yeah, and it's why I do so many live searches and multivariable live searches.
Do you not have, are you not just getting timed out constantly now, though?
No.
Okay, I don't know how you've avoided that. I cannot have up more than a single live search anymore. If I have
Do you use
one
any
live
add-ons?
search up, better trading, but that shouldn't do anything.
So I use one extension and no other add-ons at all in terms of either the trade website or the game.
Mm.
It could be that just because I get timed out if I go over 10 or so, but if I have around 7, which is my norm, I don't tend to get timed out on them.
I get timed out constantly now. It's driving me mental. Literally, I can have one whoop up and that's it. You know what? There's no way they can stop me. So I can say this. So I'm lying. I have about 11 whoops up because I can have exactly 10 up on a new account that I made purely for trading that I used on a different browser with a VPN to pretend I'm coming from another place so that I can have 10 more whoops up.
It sounds like you did something that got you flagged.
Yeah, I did too much trading. My normal excuse me. My normal league start system has about 45 different tabs open with different whoops on.
Yeah, I surprisingly don't tend to exceed 10 because what I will often do is put more variables into a single whoop rather than add.
Yeah, but I'm looking for a bunch of different things. Well, I normally have whoops up for everything I could possibly need for my entire build. Also things that my friends are going to need for their builds, and then also maybe stuff that I know will make me money.
Unless it's directly tied to a crafting project, I don't ever look for just stuff to make me money because I will make enough from whatever crafting I happen to do. And I don't really search for items for other people ever.
Fair enough. In order to... please, if you have something that you want to say.
So I think it could just be a matter of, because I don't tend to exceed 10, that for whatever reason, I've never been flagged despite doing a very high number of trades, because I'll have a whoop that will go off for 4 or 5 different items sometimes, but for all relatively rare items. And I just group it by prefix, suffix. And if the prefixes and suffixes don't cross over, I'll never get false positives.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to be more. I just don't. Like, I get that the trade site crashed and that's why they put all these things in. I get it. And I don't know how to program. I don't know how to fix it. But I do know that it's absolute garbage and that it should be fixed.
Yeah.
Wait, weren't you saying the other episode that the trade in Path of Exile is the best implementation of trade in any game ever?
That is very, very different from the mechanics behind it working. The system we have, the idea we have is the best
the idea.
Okay,
yeah.
The specific mechanics, sometimes, like, you know, the actual reliability of the system is trash. But those are different things, right? One of them is
just...
in
theory, if it worked, it would be the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it works and it's great.
It is by far the best trading system that any game has ever had when functioning.
That's good. I was thinking about moving along a little bit on the topic list as Slightly delayed arrival of BalorMage.
What are you on about? I was here the whole time.
We just didn't notice you. It was we've been talking for such a long time, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, Balor was here all the time.
Yep, I was really quiet. I just didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's the story.
Actually, I think we covered this as well. Tenkiei, do you want to quickly give your 10 cents on the Maven fights, maybe? On the how many times did you fight Maven, and how do you like the fight so far?
So I have fought her a total of 5 times. One time I went into it totally blind, and as a result, bricked the encounter, because there's a lot of things that really aren't great if you go in totally blind. It's something I do with every boss that isn't just insanely rare. Then from there, I farmed her 4 times. I'm not a fan of a fight at all. I'm not a fan of a fight because I do not like the fact that it is incredibly unrewarding for an end boss.
Absolutely.
If you compare it to something like Uber Elder, or if you compare it to something like Cortex, yes, there's the Maven's Orb, but there's nothing else on the fight that makes me go, oh, that's really interesting. And there's no chase item that I can really see from it that's, oh, wow, that's amazing. There's no Mirror Tier Watcher's Eye. There's no Eternity Shroud. There's no Perfect Nebulous.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the fight, though. That's a reward structure. You don't like the reward structure. You want it to be more rewarding. That's got nothing to do with whether the fight is good or not.
So the mechanics of the fight itself, it could be because I play very strong builds, but I found it very boring, even the first time. I found that there was a few mechanics I had to pay attention to, like the rotating beam that makes you basically heal immune and minus 10 all res, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the others, I could just kind of stand in them, and they didn't do anything to my character. I'd drop to like half, and then I'd heal up, and then I'd continue with the fight. I also really don't like the memory game at all, because it is very hard to see, and it's very annoying as a result. And so my experience with fight has been building my characters with enough DPS that I can just completely skip the memory game in the final phase. I don't even try to look anymore. I just let the beam spin around for a bit, and then when she starts the expanding circle thing, I just teleport out and in and skip it.
Yep. This is the only part of that fight that I hate, and it's because no matter how many times I do it, I can't remember it. I don't have a memory. You can't ask me to remember like that. That's not... I do reaction. That's...
Yeah. For me personally, I don't have a problem with the memory part of it. I have a problem with literally being able to see it with the spinny beams and with everything else that's going on in that part of a fight, that there are times where I just miss part of a sequence. And I know it lit up. I have no idea which section lit up.
Just that it wasn't the one at your feet.
Yes.
Like, well, this one didn't happen, so it's one of those.
Right. And the problem with that is if it's the 5th or 6th in the sequence, good luck.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one wrong is okay. Like, the worst thing that happened to me so far was that I missed the start of the sequence, and I memorized the sequence starting from the second one, and then I realized, oh, it was only 5, so I missed the first one. So it could be any of the other, like, or any of the ones that is not the second one, because it's never 2 in a row. So, yeah, that was a little bit tricky for me, because then the sequence shifted. The way that I memorize the sequences is in pairs of 3, right? So I go top, left, left, or something like that, right? But then when those pairs moved, and I had like right, top, left, right, left in my head, and I was like, oh wait, but there's no one coming. Okay, then I needed to shift those, and that was too much overload for me. But other than that, I really like the memory phase. But I talked at length about that already on the previous episode, so not going to indulge in my love for obscure mechanics and boss fights in PoE. I will say though that I agree with you, Tenkiei, that it's pretty much impossible to do the fight deathless if you go in blind. And I think some things are very counterintuitive, and specifically the expanding bubble in the nucleus phase when you fight the bosses. Just feels like a silly way to catch people off guard who have never done the fight before. But once you've done it once and you know it happens, it's impossible to die to it. So it just feels like a cheap first time kill.
Definitely. And that was the first thing that killed me on a fight. I was going through, and then it does the expanding Nova, and I'm like, what do I do? Because I hadn't really been paying close attention to the outside edge of a fight, because I was looking at the dangerous thing on my screen, which was right in front of me. And then I go, oh, wait, what do I do? I'm just going to pop defensives, and then it killed me through all of my defensives. I believe it's just a kill no matter what you have up.
Oh, I've seen people tank it.
What I do want to say is that I really, really, really like that mechanic pretty much kills you. Like, you can build specifically to defend against it. Your character's pretty meh otherwise. But I really like that it actually kills you. You just your good build amount of tankiness isn't enough to just ignore the mechanics, which I like.
Yeah.
Yeah. That also killed me when I went in blind. Like, okay, what's happening? Where do I go? Okay, I'll just stand here. Nope, dead.
Yeah, no, I really like that they're doing new things, but I hope it's not the last boss fight they add this year. I hope that there's going to be more stuff, and just along those lines of the criticisms that you brought up, like, I mean, if loot is really like a deterring factor, then sure, they could probably add some specific drops. Was it Eternity Shroud was in the game for always since Uber Elder was in there? Wasn't that added later as well?
I believe it was added later, yeah. It was just for Watcher's Eyes. For me, I feel like the problem with having a big endgame boss fight is if it doesn't have a chase item, the thing that people get commonly usually becomes farmed to the point where the price does not make it worth doing in a trade environment. So if you look at the Writs versus the Maven Orbs, between the Writs and the elevated sections, you make, I think the average is an Exalt per kill at best. But with RNG and variants, you could easily lose 10x before you end up balancing it out. So there needs to be something to chase to say, well, but I could get the Starforge, or I could get the Eternity Shroud, or I could get that really good Watcher's Eye, to push you to do it, even if you're getting meh returns for a while.
Or just make your average person excited to do the one that they've built up because it could do something cool, right? Because right now you just don't run the one you've got. If you're a less playtime person, you've just got the one you're already familiar with the fight. You've done it before now. It's now just not worth doing it when you get your one together. You just sell it because there's no reason. There's nothing to get out of it. So there is that.
You could get lucky and get the Maven's Orb, but in my experience, it's so inconsistent. I've done like 15 Mavens on Standard, and I've got one Maven Orb.
But a Maven Orb isn't really a big ticket item, though.
No, I mean, the thing is, the Maven's Orb in Standard, for example, would be 34x, and the Maven's Writ, the access to the thing is like 6x. So if you get 1 in 5, that would already be profit. And then, if you get lucky, then it would be a lot of profit, but I didn't get lucky.
Yeah. I think it's either 1 in 4 or 1 in 6. I forget the number, but it's one of those two. And the way it ends up balancing out is in softcore trade, or the League softcore trade, you basically pay for your attempts with the orbs that you get.
Yeah.
And so anything else is profit, like the elevated sextants, the uniques, etc., but they aren't exciting. And, to say, oh, well, I'm doing 100 of these, and yes, I will make 100x after doing that, is fine, but it's a lot less exciting than, oh, I'm going to do 100 of these, and I'll make 100x, but I might make 100 mirrors. You're never going to. But there's always that little teeny hint in the back of your mind that you could get something amazing if you keep at it.
Yeah. Like, I could get a triple hatred Watcher's Eye. Like, it just could happen. I could just run an Uber Elder, get a triple Hatred Watcher's Eye. I could just drop. Like, that's worth a lot of money. I've never seen one, but it could. Right?
What would you say if Maven could drop influenced items with elevated mods? Just like that?
Oh, that would be interesting.
Ooh. Like, just completely random from all the tables.
Yeah, exactly, basically. So that... well, maybe a chance to be an elevated mod, or one guaranteed item with a guaranteed elevated mod. Just like, influenced items drop with one guaranteed influenced mod to begin with.
That could be interesting. I feel like that wouldn't fix the problem because most people don't really know about crafting things and won't even see potential in items. Like I've seen people re-roll over items that were 2 harvest crafts away from being 100x items.
The worst is when someone comes to you asking for a craft, and if you use the craft, you're going to ruin the item, and they want it anyway. And there have been times where I've been like, I'm not going to craft this for you because I'm not going to ruin this item because the method you're talking about is going to destroy it.
I'm like, you've got like a 1 in 8 chance of success, but if you just do it another way, it's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Stop.
Although, if you could get multiple elevated mods on an item, I do think it would add that, wow factor of, let's just say you get an Explodey chest with Explodey, elevated power charge on crit, elevated consecrated ground. That's an amazing item that requires no further crafting, and it's going to be really, really rare.
I don't know. I feel like it needs something. It does need that big chase potential that will almost certainly probably never happen to me, but could. I just need that chance. Then I'd probably do it. Otherwise, I'd just skip them. Yeah. I will at some point do like 50 of them back to back just to get really comfortable with the fight. But that will just be me burning currency to get used to the fight so I can do it really early league next league.
When it's still worth it.
Yeah. When I'm one of the people that are like the 10 people that are there doing the fight right now, then it'll be super worth.
Yeah, do you see any potential for adjustment of the new endgame systems periodically, just like we see adjustment to the Atlas, where maps get shifted around in tiers and regions, stuff like that? Do we see any potential for the passive trees exchanging passives between each other or moving positions from region to region? Or you think that will remain static for a while?
I hope, but I don't think any of them will change. I think they'll just shuffle maps around.
I think for the next 3 to 4 leagues, they'll stay the same, unless there's some sort of influence, like GGG feels that too much currency is generated in Valdo's Rest, so they're going to nerf Valdo's Rest specifically, or that Harvest is too common, so Haywark Hamlet's going to get nerfed. Outside of that, I see it staying the same for for 3 to 4 leagues, and then getting a big change, rework, etc. The reason I think that is when things get too stale and too fixed, GGG tends to make more sweeping changes. It's going to be about the time for another expansion in about a year. And that's, I think, when, if ever, there's going to be something new added. Also, with future content, maybe certain things will be taken off the tree and new things will be added if a league mechanic is very conducive to being added to the tree.
Right, true. So if Ritual goes core, there may be some Ritual passives in some zone, for example.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I would love it if the passives were changed out every league. Like, what's available on our Zana crafts and stuff is rotated around every league. But I feel like that's too much work and it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
Trying
I
to
agree.
balance them all every time. Like, I would love it, but I don't see it happening.
It's also an important, a thin line to walk for the developers, where you kind of want to shake up the game enough so that it feels sufficiently new, but you don't want to scare people off who are returning players, and you don't want to give them a huge catch-up study session where every league they have to learn for 10 hours what is new, which already, like, there's a lot of things changing every league and a lot of adjustments that you need to catch up to if you're a returning player.
I mean, at least, like, I know what I'm really enjoying. I'm really enjoying Legion farming. That's super fun. Still super profitable even right now. I actually stopped running fractured maps and started running this purely because it's easier and less investment, and I just have fun doing it. But at least next league, it'll be shuffled maps. There'll be different maps there. Maybe I won't even like a map there, and I'll go over to Valdo's or something else. Right? Like, at least shuffling the maps around is going to make a difference. It won't just be like, oh, you just run this map forever.
Yeah. I liked Legion farming early on. When I switched to a Penance Brand character, I stopped liking it because of the freeze bug, because I had a almost 100% chance to trigger that bug.
Freeze bug?
Yeah. If you froze an enemy that was phased, they would just stay frozen and stop phasing. And so the blacksmith boss of Dune's map, where I was farming my legions, I would put a Penance Brand on him, it would explode, he would be frozen, and he would just stay frozen unless I left the instance and came back. Apparently hitting him for over his maximum life bugs him out and permanently freezes him.
That would be annoying. I would find that very inconvenient.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was just a side effect of how hard the Penance Brand was hitting with the Headhunter stacks.
Just take out support gems. It's like a gem swap, but then just
if anything,
out the gems for the boss.
Yeah. If anything, what I should have done is remember to just take off my Headhunter quickly, but that turns off my auras, so I tend never to do it.
You take off the Headhunter, you lose 70 dex.
Right, which turns off all my auras. Yep.
It's ridiculous, but that's 70 dex. Half my builds function on that 60-something on dex that comes from that belt.
Yeah, I think what I would have had to do is take a dex belt in and swap the dex belt for the Headhunter so my gear doesn't break.
That's a good thought. Or you could have just swapped in Ellie Focus.
I was talking earlier that one of the biggest nerfs they could do to Headhunter without actually destroying the item would be just straight up getting rid of the dex.
I don't think I would be wearing it on my Penance Brand character if it didn't have the dex.
There's a bunch of characters that I would just be like, well, I can't fit a Headhunter anymore. I actually need that dex.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I absolutely need it. I could fit a Headhunter and use other affixes elsewhere. But I also, for any content below 60% Delirious, I noticed no difference, really, Headhunter versus no Headhunter. Everything just explodes anyway, instantly. And so I wouldn't feel any specific need to use the Headhunter when I could instead just use a Stygian that's rolled with a Dex Essence.
Yeah. So I'm like, I think that's the little like nugget they could do to make Headhunter just so much less powerful, and it doesn't even change how it works. Just get rid of the dex on it and be like, ooh, so bad. Don't want them to do that, by the way. I like my Headhunter; it's fine.
Would be nice if there was other build choices that compete even remotely with Headhunter.
What's it called? The speedy tailwind style.
Viscous Leash? Wait, what do you mean?
Flow Untethered? No. Upgraded version of that?
Yeah, the upgraded version of that.
Reclamation.
Yep.
That's the one. That competes in a lot of builds.
Also, depending on the build, I think it could be argued that Risalathus Coil competes. It's not insane on the same level if you're doing highly juiced content, but if you're not doing highly juiced content, I do think it's a competitive choice. I also think that Soul Tether or Replica Soul Tether for what it offers competes, again, if you're not doing highly juiced content. If you're doing highly juiced content, nothing competes.
I could go with those. Those 3 belts are pretty damn useful.
Oh yeah, the cooldown recovery rate. Let's see.
Nah, it's the slipstream is the important part. It's like a massively increased effect tailwind. It's action speed.
From the Harbinger.
Makes you, yeah.
Yep.
Makes you super speedy. I think it's listed under the Harbinger of Time.
Yeah, I got it.
Happens, not. Yeah. That one's incredibly good. Very strong.
Doesn't provide a number for the action speed increase. But yeah, the wiki. Cool. Neat. So again, to conclude the topic of the Atlas passives and the new endgame loop, assuming there's no changes outside maybe a few balance changes on some passives, you'd still be hyped to progress through the same system next league and to play the same passives on the same regions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be fine with it.
I'd be fine with it. I wouldn't quite use the word hyped, but that's more to do with how I play the game and what I enjoy in the game rather than a flaw of the system itself. That what I'm going to be most excited for next league is crafting interactions and the builds that result from that. And so will I still enjoy progressing through it and all that? Yes, but I'm not going to be actively looking forward to it because what I really play Path of Exile for is build making and crafting.
That's fair.
Yeah. No, I think like the actual game itself wouldn't be the same, wouldn't be as enjoyable if it wasn't for the very intricate crafting systems and build making systems. And the gameplay itself is, I wouldn't say rather dull or anything, but it's like, it's not as mentally stimulating as the theory behind it. Most of the time.
Yeah. And build making, especially if a highest end with weaving harvest in, it's really interesting, but I'm also looking forward to a time when it's not part of the game, because harvest is the worst thing that has been added to Path of Exile recently.
Cha-ching. I agree. Harvest should never have come. I mean, I was okay with it as a league, but it should never have come core.
Yeah, I agree. I really like Harvest as a league, and as an experiment for GGG to get information about crafting, I think it was great for that purpose explicitly. Bringing it back is the worst thing they have done in recent history, and it is terrible. And I'd be very happy to hear in the 3.14 patch notes or announcements that we feel Harvest is a little overtuned, so we're removing it and reworking it again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be brilliant. Because
They will.
Yeah, no, I really think that they were, even before it was announced, I thought that Harvest would come back in some capacity, but I would have never guessed that they just bring it back the way it was and then at a lower rate of spawning, because that didn't solve any of the problems that it brought in.
In fact, it makes it worse, because now it means that for one of my builds, I can still make whatever I want. If I want to spend 100 exalts or 1,000 exalts on a character, I can do that easily, and I can make items in PoB before I ever play or level the character. And then I can just craft them, and they will be exactly as I made them in Path of Building. A normal person can't do that. But the problem with that really comes in when you think about the fact that every time I make one of those perfect items, it's a 20, 30, or even 40% power level upgrade, as it can be hundreds of percents power level upgrades, as opposed to the normal version of that item that anyone would have access to. And so the power gap becomes so extreme to the point where this Penance Brand build, for example, if I take off the Headhunter and I do a 60% Delirious Tier 16 map, I notice functionally no difference in my damage, as opposed to an Alkengo Tier 16. Without Harvest, that would not be the case. I would notice layers of Delirium after the first 20%.
Yeah.
And so it kind of makes two different games. And my big concern is Path of Exile at its core is a game about challenge. If it doesn't challenge you, you're going to get bored of it. You're going to quit very quickly. So it needs to be challenging. If Harvest completely removes that challenge, you either have a bunch of players who have no reason to keep playing because their builds become perfect way too fast, or you have to make the game significantly harder. And any balance change that balances around Harvest is going to be something like all enemies do, 10 to 30% more damage and all enemies have 1,000% increased life.
Yeah.
It's going to be absurd because I remember a few leagues ago,
It should make it fun for us.
Yeah, it would. Oh, I'd love
Mind.
that. But outside of something like a tier 19 map, that really shouldn't be the content because most people's builds would just get splattered instantly. And I mean, I remember a few leagues ago when I thought 5 million DPS looked really good on a build. Now I'm looking at that and going, anything under 15 is kind of really lacking, isn't it?
Like I look at 10 million DPS builds as league start builds now.
Yeah, same.
I'm like, can my league start get to about 10? Yeah, it can. Okay, that'll be comfortable. That'll be good for the first week and a half until I'm done with the league start build.
Yeah, and that's
annual 10 mil.
Yeah, that's not
it
healthy at all.
To do everything.
Yeah,
like that should be an everything build.
Right, and again, if it's something very specific like Delve Depth 1000 plus or Tier 19 maps 100% Delirious, I'm totally okay with those requiring absurd things. If you need 100 mil DPS for either of those, that's fine because that's not content made for everybody. That's content made for people who are willing to invest a large amount of time and resources into doing the thing. But the problem is when that 10 million DPS power level is available around league start, that means it is accessible to everyone, which means the game now has to be balanced around that level of power, meaning a build that does only 1 or 2 mil DPS, even though it might have been a great build, is going to be pushed out. And you actually saw that that's the biggest thing that's wrong with bows. Bows were fine when the overall damage needed for content was much lower. But as content got buffed, especially around Metamorph, when they added the new influences, which added a big power spike, bows all of a sudden became complete shit. And that's going to happen with more and more archetypes. ED Contagion, for example. The minute it can't quickly and efficiently kill white mobs, that build no longer exists.
Well, good thing that white mobs just need to be looked at in order to drop dead.
Yeah, but imagine where all of a sudden you need 8 to 10 mil DPS to kill white mobs because Harvest stays in the game. And everyone just has 8 to 10 mil DPS.
Yeah, no, like you said, if that becomes the new standard, it invalidates pretty much anything that's worse. And also harvest crafting itself is like way too central and way too dominant in the item creation process. Like, you're not gonna make a good item without harvest. In a world where harvest exists.
Yeah, not at all. I recently did some math, so for one of my recent videos, I made a perfect penance brand helmet because I wanted to fix mine, and I decided, if I'm going to fix it, instead of just doing the really boring add remove fizz till I get T1, I'm going to remake it. I'm going to document every step of the process and tell people how to do it.
Yep.
I made that, and it was about 20 crafting steps total, counting each individual craft used. It cost me about 20x. I got relatively lucky. It could have easily cost 40 or 50. That item is perfect. Normally, the only way you'd be able to make it is RNG with Essence of Horror, and the odds of doing that is something like 1 in 450,000. But I can just reproduce it really easily. 100% chance, no risk, once I get a clean base with the prefix of Conk Effect and the suffix of the Essence of Horror mod.
Yep.
So, to close that line of thought, if they implemented other ways, like if harvest was just one part in a crafting ecosystem, then you would be more okay with it. If there was other ways to acquire the same reliability or the same quality level of items, or if something was taken away from harvest and put into another system, so that harvest wouldn't be the only dominant thing in the crafting process, but that you'd have to employ different ways?
I say no, because I still think the power level that it gives and the fact that you can literally make an item in PoB before you play a build and know with 100% certainty that you are getting that item in game after X number of iterations, it's just way too powerful. That just a random, how do we nerf Harvest? First of all, it shouldn't interact with metamods at all. Currently, it fully interacts with metamods, and that is terrible because it makes crafting things way too easy.
I don't mind that. I don't think that's the problem.
I mean, it's not the problem. In my opinion, it's just part of it. Second of all, it shouldn't be able to make perfect items. Just as a random example of how to nerf it might be, Tier 2 and Tier 1 mods cannot be interacted with Harvest. You can only interact with a mod that's Tier 3 or lower, which would mean most influence mods you no longer can put on items at all because they are single tier. Like Explodey, you cannot Harvest craft that in any way. You can't remove it with Harvest, you can't add it with Harvest. I guess Reforge keeping prefixes or suffixes technically could, but that's just a Chaos Orb at that point.
I had an idea. My idea was always to make it so that only one or possibly at most two mods on an item could be harvest crafted. So like if you were to harvest craft, add remove fire all day to try and get fire res tier 1, right? Like that's what you're after. That would just show up in a different color, and that would be a harvest crafted piece on that item. And you wouldn't be able to alter another one on that. It'd be either one or two depending on balance, and then you could, what you'd have to do in that situation is you would have to craft other ways to get an item to near the perfect spot where you wanted. And then you would only be able to use harvest to polish it up. You could also take an item that was just okay and use harvest to make it decent, but you would have to get a large amount of the way there via other crafting methods, and you'd just be using harvest to like polish it up. And I think that would be okay. And it would still keep the idea of harvest in, but you would then, you now have to go the risky method with other things. You have to fossil, you have to essence, you have to spam things, you have to get the craft to a pretty damn good place and then bring it into harvest just to polish up that last bit of it.
Yeah, right? I like that. I do think that maybe the amount of interaction between harvest and influence should also be severely limited, which is to say, to prevent more things like the Tailwind problem, which is that the crit tag was removed from Tailwind to prevent harvest from breaking it, but that also potentially, if applied to more items, is going to make it harder to use any other crafting method in the game to make it, i.e. if Explode lost the Fizz tag, now you can't use Jagged Fossils to encourage Explode. So I don't think that's a good long-term solution. The better long-term solution is the only type of harvest craft that could interact with influence is remove influence, add influence, remove add influence, or remove non-add influence.
So no harvest crafting at all on influenced items, basically.
Right, except with the influence craft.
Yeah. Or with influenced mods.
Not influenced mods.
Like I could still fix up my res on my influence piece.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, exactly. You could fix res, life, whatever else you want. The only exception to this would again be generic mods like, a Reforge. It could still roll the influence mod, it just won't be the guaranteed one. You could get, Fizz from hits is taken as lightning as your guaranteed on Reforge Fizz, and also hit Explodey.
Yeah, like you can't. Everything. One of my biggest problems is that there's no fail state. Harvest crafting, there's no fail state. There's just you need more money. You can't fail a harvest craft. You can only just need to spend more. It's not like if you go fossil crafting, you could spend 100x on fossils looking for something and then end up with a white item that's the same as where you started, which I know some people don't like, but the fact that that's a risk that happens is that's the best, most interesting part of crafting. You remove
that's
that.
What makes the successful craft feel much more successful if there's a failed state.
Yeah. Whereas with harvest, there is no such thing as a fail state if you know what you're doing.
Well, if I was gonna say that if you know what you're doing, you're only doing the crafts with harvest that don't have a failed state. But you could very well have crafts that have a failed state. But why should you be doing those if there are methods with which you don't have one?
Yeah. And a good example of this is the remove non-add. If you look in TFT and try to buy remove non-add, it's usually very, very cheap. It's very, very cheap because a
So
lot of
good.
people, a lot of people think there are fail states innate to it because it can remove any mod. It can't. It can only remove a mod on the item if it can replace it with a mod of the correct tag. So a
Yeah.
good example of this is, let's just say I made a elevated explode plus elevated, let's just say Fizz taken his chaos chest. And I wanted to put spell crit on it. The only possible suffix that is going to be tagged with caster is spell crit. There are no prefixes that are tagged with caster. So I can safely use remove non-caster, add caster on that chess piece, and as long as my suffixes are full, it will never hit the explode, and it will never hit the Fizz taken as chaos, because it knows that it must add a suffix, so it must always remove a suffix to add a mod, because it can never fail to add a mod.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a ton of iterations of that when that stuff like that happens. Like
Yes.
tons.
It's
And the
absurd how
removed
abusive.
the removed nons are how you get. The removed nons are how you really easily get boots that are like elusive, tailwind, onslaught, pierce, and there's something else, and then movement speed. Like you get like 4 or 5 influence mods on an item by doing it that way.
Yeah.
It's all very confusing, but not really. It's just confusing until you understand it, and then it's like, oh, this actually works.
Well, it still requires a lot of interacting with the system in order to memorize which specific item base type or item class can roll what the mod pools offer and what's possible with the system.
I
But
don't
the
think
underlying
anyone
logic
memorized.
of it is not very hard.
You just open Craft of Exile. Like no one's Craft of Exile is just but I don't think anyone's memorized anything. You just go to Craft of Exile.
I do. I've just memorized it passively from doing hundreds of crafts.
Right, yeah.
But also, I don't like going to Craft of Exile, actually, recently. I prefer PoEDB, because PoEDB added tag filters at the top. So if I want to know, okay, what happens if I, remove non-add chaos on this item? Chaos tag, and only the chaos mods show up, and it makes it so much easier to check things.
PoEDB.
Yeah, I really like PoEDB as well for looking at mod pools, but I do know that Craft of Exile is very good for like 90% of the other queries that you could be running, where you're like, okay, how likely is it that I hit this or that result in so and so many resonators and fossils or something like that. It's really good to use Craft of Exile.
Yeah.
But for just plain overview of, hey, what could I roll? What does the mod pool offer for this or that item with this or that influence? I much prefer PoEDB.
Oh my god. I haven't
The
seen the
visibility is
new
so good.
tags at the top. They're so good.
Yes, it is amazing.
What the hell? They've even got non as a tag.
Yep.
But they
So
have
you can know
none
exactly.
as a tag? Okay, that's
Yes.
sick.
Yeah, like you can tag non-cold and be like, okay, so these are the options.
Yeah, so these are the things that are going to get removed.
That's insane.
Oh
Back
yeah,
to
I see.
PoEDB it
Wow.
is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
insane. I need to show that on stream.
I am sold. Craft of Exile. It's been fun. See you later, buddy.
So basically, you can highlight non-life here and see all the non-life mods. Although, can you also do that here? No, you can't do it for those, for the notables on cluster jewels. But that's maybe a bad example because
Yeah, cluster jewels are unfortunately not part of the list down at the bottom, and it only filters the list down at the bottom.
Yep.
Here, none cold, none lightning. Well, you don't want to highlight both at the same time, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it is super, super helpful for making things, especially with remove non-add.
I just really like PoEDB for the plain visuals, and especially since they added the dark mode, or I don't know whether it's the new default, but it used to be so terrible to look at with the white background, but now it's dark, it's so good. Could look at PoEDB all day.
Websites should not be allowed to be made public without a dark mode.
Yeah. I agree. Well, so the perfect segue then. With your focus on crafting and build making, do you normally experience fatigue of PoE, or does that keep the game relatively fresh because the amount of things that you could be doing is practically unlimited?
Yeah. Yes, I do, but usually it's related to performance issues. So I felt fatigue very badly in Delirium League, and I felt fatigue very badly in Heist League. And in both cases, it was tied to the fact that the league start performance was god awful. I could barely do Deliriums for most of Delirium League because my game would just lock up and freeze. In fact, the build that I wrote a guide on in Delirium League was me going, okay, how can I make a build that is still playable if I'm frozen for multiple seconds in a Delirium? And everything I did, it was a Cyclone Berserker with War Cries. And all I'd do is I'd hold down left click to keep cycloning, to gain life on hit, and I'd mash my other keys and hope they went off enough that I wouldn't die. And it mostly worked.
Nice.
And in Heist, it just crashed. It always feels bad being forced to play standard on a league, not because you don't want to interact with the content, but because you literally cannot interact with the content because it just crashes. And so even though the second month of Heist was a lot better, I did way less in Heist, and I really didn't have much motivation to keep doing things because the performance was just so bad early that it tainted the whole experience. Whereas this league, we're apparently 2 months in. If you asked me, I would have said, oh, we're probably about a month in. It feels like I could keep going, and until close to the very end, I definitely will.
I don't know, burnout just hasn't really happened as much this league. Like, I definitely feel like I've done everything I want, but I don't want to stop playing either, which the last 2 leagues I have wanted to stop playing. In fact, I've just gone and played League of Legends for like a month straight. Still the need for that this time. Like, I got shit to do.
Yeah, I don't feel the need either, but I still will, because I always, at the end of a league, take at least a short break, play some other games, do some other stuff.
It does help if you're planning to go hard on the next league start. Sorry, Balor?
What do you go to alternate games then?
Oh, I'd be curious to hear that as well.
Yeah, it really depends. For example, it's been Hades before. It's been Magic the Gathering Arena. Last time I didn't do it on stream, but I played through Cyberpunk. Because the events were fine. I did them for a couple days, but I wasn't really into them. And so most of that time I was just playing Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Played through Divinity before.
Tried the Cyberpunk on stream. My computer can't handle it. I've gotten to the point where I need to get a streaming PC, but can't afford it. So we'll just wait for that before I can play any intensive games.
I never tried it, but I strongly suspected that it wouldn't work. And so instead of potentially making my experience miserable early on with the game, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to play it off stream and I'm just going to do other things.
Makes a lot of sense. I can totally relate with what you said in regards to performance and fatigue, because playing in a softcore trade environment in Badger's Private League, I experienced for the first time that in a while that I actually hate running the game in parties, because the amount of visual clutter and performance problems that are related to party play just make me not enjoy the game as much. Like, it just gets tiring. Like, you look at the screen for 2 or 3 hours and your eyes are done. Like, your brain feels like jittered and all over the place. And I couldn't do 16, 17, 18 hour streams with party play unless I guess I could get used to it. You can get used to anything, but
yeah, it's part of why I'm a solo player in terms of PoE. I don't really do group mapping or anything, and that sort of feeling always nags at me. So I always build around, you know what, I'm just going to be a solo player.
Yep, me too. I level with a group at the beginning, and we like operate as a team, quote unquote, but more in the way of just like pooling resources and doing different jobs and all off on our own doing things, because it's just not fun to play in a party.
And
It's
another
not fun.
Yeah. And aside of a party play thing, I mean, this is more personal, but I don't like feeling reliant on other people. So I would never do something like a carry or a bot situation where my character does not function without the other person.
I don't mind it. Like I think I would enjoy party if the party playing was smooth. I think I would enjoy it a lot more. I'd be perfectly happy to do more party play oriented stuff. It just never is really smooth.
Yeah. And that's also why I don't always just chain Delirious maps. From a profit per hour standpoint, I should absolutely be chaining at least 60% Delirious for every map that I run. And I can afford to do that. But I also sometimes just want to run a map and not spend 10 minutes picking up items on the ground. And I want to just run a map and not lag out or have the game crash. And so I will just alch a map and go. Is it a massive amount of profit lost? Yeah. But it's more enjoyable to me to lose that money than to hate the game because it's crashed for the 8th time in the last hour.
Crashed that many times out of Delirious maps?
In Balor's Rest, anyway, because Harbinger Blob.
Yep. Doing the loot filter thing will help a lot.
Yeah,
it doesn't get rid of it, but it helps a lot.
Yeah, I actually, based on some numbers that a friend was talking about, I did some math on how many items are likely to be generated in a 100% Delirious fractured map with quant gear. The answer is over 100,000.
Yeah, I was gonna guess over 100, but
yeah, and this is just based off of the number of 6 links because he's using the corrupted drop, and he got his record's now over 200 6 links in a single map. That is just
206 links in a single map?
Yes.
You can't carry them out.
Nope.
No, you cannot.
And if it's that many things that got 6 linked, which means they won the 1 in 144 upon being corrupted, which means they're also either a 2-handed weapon or a chest piece.
Yeah.
Which is such a small fraction, and it's not 100% chance to corrupt the item. There's just a massive amount of stuff being generated.
Yeah, that's crazy. I feel like that's one of the first things that, or one of the most urgent things that need to be addressed by GGG. The item hell.
Yeah, and I know there's been the argument of it's not going to feel like PoE, or the maps are going to feel empty, or there's not going to feel like loot. But if I'm specifically making my loot filter to make the maps as empty as possible anyway, I don't think I will notice. If you took non-influenced rare items completely out of the game as a drop, personally, in how I play the game, I would barely notice. Well, from maps. Obviously, during acts, that would be hugely detrimental, but from maps. If it is not an influence rare item, it no longer drops. I wouldn't really notice.
80% of the influence rares are hidden on my filters by the end of the first week.
Yeah.
It's actually insane how much it gets hidden. It's actually insane just how much gets hidden in just the semi-strict standard NeverSync filter.
Definitely.
The one that everyone just starts on. That's just the default baseline. And literally 60 to 70% of the things that drop on the ground aren't shown. Somewhere in the vicinity of 60 to 70% of the loot in the game is never seen by anyone at any point in the game. That could all disappear and no one would fucking notice.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be possible from a technical standpoint, but I've always wondered if the best short-term solution would be hide, or based off of hide states on loot filter, that the item just never drops. That the game checks, okay, is this supposed to show up? If yes, generate it and have it drop. If no, it never gets dropped.
Or just switch off the 3D models for items, because that's not visually important anyway, because with all the fog on the ground from Delirium. People don't see items on the ground anyway. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, every diff card, every item, everything has a 3D model that drops visually onto the floor. And I think that's a big problem. I mean, of course, like Balor said, the item labels being rendered, whether they're shown or not, is a big thing as well.
Yeah,
But
I guess potentially a way to solve that would also be if it doesn't show up on your loot filter as no 3D model. So then newer players, people who aren't running juiced content, could still see their items dropping on the ground and see and go pick up the pair of gloves, because they're probably not going to have it hidden. It would probably cause an issue with the game instantly crashing if you ever hit Alt and it tried to render all that stuff instantly, but also it does that anyway. So that doesn't really make anything worse.
yeah. Yeah, performance improves drastically in content where there's no items dropping, yeah. Now that leads to the meme build with the stacking the combustibles corrupted unique jewel that reduces the quantity of items drop. If you stack enough of those, then you won't drop any items, and that is actually pretty good. You want a speed map, but the problem is you're not gonna get any returns. You're just gonna be able to finish the maps really fast.
I want to buy combustibles rework where it just destroys certain items instantly. Crash the server. Never mind.
Right, that's just another thing it has to do.
Yeah. If, you hit the Harbinger blob or something and several thousand items just get created and destroyed within a fraction of a second.
Yeah. Oof.
Another big factor for me that GGG could do to prevent my personal fatigue, I know that's different for me than it is for you guys, because the nature of HC SSF requires me to start new characters quite often, and I do often do practices for new leagues and fresh restarts. And one of the things that really frustrates me, even though it's like a tiny little thing in the game, but is every time having to set up stuff like attack without moving on every skill. That should be the default. I don't see a reason why it's not the default outside of dash. Default. And if it's not the default, I should at least have a setting in the UI that would make it the default, right? Like the default setting for that could be off so that nothing changes for new players. But I get immensely frustrated at having to do that every single time, because if you're practicing Act 1 runs, that's a significant amount of your time. I mean, obviously in the large lifespan of a character to level 100, it doesn't matter at all. But yeah, just having to put that onto every skill while you're moving annoys the shit out of me. And also stuff like switching off the tutorials, hiding all the pop-ups, all those things that you do every single time you play through the game. And then you hit all the pop-ups, you switched off all the tutorials. The moment the first watchstone drops in the game shoves a pop-up into your face and tries to explain to you what a watchstone is and what you do with it. And I'm like, dude, please just go out of my way. I want to click behind the thing. There is something that I want to do, and you're just preventing me from doing it. You're in the way.
It's very annoying that hide all tutorials doesn't hide all tutorials.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive. And hide all pop-ups doesn't hide all pop-ups.
Right?
Yep, it's very annoying. I think in terms of the attack without moving, even if dash exists, it is way less annoying for me to turn it off on dash and just have it on for everything else by default.
Exactly.
And even then, maybe they code it so that on dash it's off by default and everything else is on. And if that's not possible, I would still rather turn it off for every dash gem I use than have to turn it on for every other gem I use on every build ever.
Yep. And then you die or here or there, and you realize, oh wait, I didn't have it on that skill. That's why I died, because my character, instead of using the ability, tried to move. And I learned that the hard way again in this Badger Private League, where when you flip your gems, it doesn't remember it because it's a new gem. Just like the MTX, which is really funny because they claimed that they uncoupled the MTX from the actual items because you don't put the MTX onto the actual item, but you put it into the cosmetic tab, but it's still linked to the actual item because if I take my MTX gem off and I flip it for a 20 quality gem, it doesn't have the MTX on anymore once I put it back on, so I have to put it again. And in the same way, I have to put attack without moving. And if I just could set up the game in a way that the game remembers that which ability goes onto which button every single time, that it automatically puts that ability there, regardless of whether it's a new character or whether it's a quality gem, it's a different gem. It just would always go on the same thing.
Yeah, I would love that because I tend to use the same keybinds. Even if it's not the same skill, I wish I could assign something like default movement skills to 2.
Yeah.
Or, default attack and spell skills to...
Skill bind affinity.
Yeah.
How about just that whenever I put on a skill that's a Val skill, the one that I want in my right click is never the Val version, ever. It's not once have I ever wanted the Val version to go on left on right click. The normal version goes there.
Oh, see, I'm the opposite. I tend to put the Val version on right click and the normal version on 1.
Really?
Yep. Because I find it easier when using a skill over and over and over and over again to hold down a key with my right hand than to be clicking on my mouse while also clicking to move.
Fair.
Yeah, so I have the Val version, which is usually an emergency button on right click, because it's really easy when I'm clicking around to move and something hits me to hit my emergency button.
Emergency button, so it's Val Discipline, Val Grace, something like that?
Yep. And Val RF I'll put on something like 4 or 5 so I don't accidentally hit it as easily.
Yeah. For me, the one thing that they could change that would make everything a lot nicer for me is, you know how we unlocked Scion? Right? Like new players for the first time don't have Scion. We've unlocked Scion so we can make it at a league start, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I would like a gem vendor in every town that just sells every gem that's available at that level.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. So you don't have to travel between towns. Like just an additional NPC that has all the gems that you could have gotten from the other towns.
And also the ones I could have gotten on other classes. Because I'm limited to buy only the gems available to Shadow and not the gems that are still level 8 gems but available to other classes. And so to make half of my builds, I have to go and log on to an alt, remember all the gems I want to buy at every single level, pre-purchase them all in a tab so that I can use them on my... Why can I not just buy whatever gem I want once I reach the appropriate level? Why?
How would you feel if that NPC was Siosa, and if you did the library quest, he just appeared in town for the rest of the league for all future characters?
Or you could invite him to your hideout.
Yeah, or you could invite... Yeah.
I hate doing the library, but I would do it once. But, I mean, I would prefer it was just something account-wide to unlock, just like Scion was, right? So,
yeah.
Because the only argument for not having all things available forever is brand new players being like, that's way too many gems, it's way too overwhelming. And like, I get that. That's a valid argument for your first playthrough. So what about the first time your account ever beats Katava 10?
Yeah, that could do it.
Like, ta-da, here's the vendor.
Or if it wanted to tie it to something even further on, it could be the first time you encounter a Conqueror.
Yeah, or even the first time you kill Cirrus one. I don't care where it is.
Yeah.
But just make it an account unlock so that you only have to ever reach that milestone one time. And then it's just available forever. The only downside of that is that it would change the race meta or whatever, because everyone would suddenly have access to all the things. But personally, I don't care.
Yeah, So I'm not going to say that racing isn't important to Path of Exile, because it does build community and it's definitely good for the game. But I don't think racing should ever be a reason why core gameplay changes that would benefit most, if not all, players aren't done.
Yeah.
Instead, make a racing-specific adjustment to the races. Like, you can make a private league that turns that mod off. That all of a sudden, the gem vendor can be turned off in a private league. Races can still have it, but it doesn't hurt anyone.
I think getting a gem vendor after Act 10 Kitava would barely hurt any races. It would just make it so that there is more of an equal...
wouldn't be after acting Kitava, right? It would be permanent forever. You'd log into your very first character in a league and you would just have a vendor there that sold all the gems that would be available.
Oh, permanent. I thought it was league specific, like Ascendancy trials or something like that. That you have to do it once per league.
No, I'm talking like the Scion unlock.
Okay, yeah. No, right? I got the metaphor now that you mentioned. Yeah, but don't you think it would be enough if it were once per league? I mean, especially for you as a softcore player, like you do it once and that's the same between softcore and hardcore.
Sure. But why bother? Why do it that way? Why not just have it permanently?
Honestly, I feel the same way about lab trials. Why are lab trials a once a league thing when I have to deal with the RNG of finding it when I've done it so many times now? I get the idea that it's to not have players have this big advantage, but outside of SSF, I don't really think there is any appreciable advantage from having lab trials just unlocked at, level 1 first character of a league. There's a lot of little things that have kind of gotten power crept on or obscured or whatever that are very annoying to go do, like finding Uber lab trials. I've gotten to level 95 before when I've decided, how many levels is it going to take before I find this last trial if I don't just go into global 820 and get it in 20 seconds?
The answer is 97. You can get. I've gotten to level 97 before.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
See, I think that's insane though. That shouldn't be the case, but I think it's fine that needs to be unlocked per league. Also, what's been mentioned in chat is unveiled items. I think it's completely fine that that's per league and that you have to progress like that per league. But the nature of how it is progressed has been the same for such a long time, and it causes so much fatigue having to pick up items and having to unveil them one by one, or just like you said, leveling to level 90 plus without getting the last Uber Lab trial that you need. And there's some very simple things that could be done to both of those. Well, more so to lab trials than to unveils. Sure, there's something that you could do to unveils to make that easier, like an unveil all button, where you can just basically unveil things in a sequence without having to click them back and forth. And maybe adding some visual indicator to items so that you can, without hovering them, determine whether they have a veiled mod or not. Which, for me personally, when I unveil things, I always go to the vendor afterwards and sell all the unveiled stuff, and I always notice, oh, there's still a ring here that I didn't unveil. Oh, back to June and unveil, back to the vendor. Yeah. Oh wait, dispelled. Oh shit, go back. And I don't see a reason why there's not like a similar to the influences, like a visual indicator on the base that it has a veiled mod.
I'm gonna be honest, if I unveil a bunch of stuff and then vendor it and then forget a ring and then forget a belt, I'm deleting the belt. It's not getting unveiled.
Or just vendoring it.
I just vendor them. I'm just like, oh well, looks like I missed that thing.
Yeah.
Most of the time I will straight delete it out of spite. I'm just like, no. You do not get vendored, you get deleted.
Yeah, and for lab trials specifically, like, I mean, we talked about that many times. I feel kind of silly to bring that up again, but, you could be able to pop an offering into the map device to guarantee spawn a lab trial, or you could make it so that it prioritizes lab trials that you haven't had before when you get them from Zana, or there's a lot of ways how they could make it so that you can still, you still have to progress it every league, but the chances that you get shafted by RNG are significantly lower. That if you play with dedication, you're guaranteed to have it by the end of day 2 or something like that.
And now I know this isn't going to happen, but my personal favorite solution is how about I just don't have to do fucking lab at all? God, I hate lab. It's so shit.
I
Just
second
give
that
you my
because
ascendancy points for free.
yeah, or just let me click an altar. You know what? You get all the trials, you click the altar, you're done. Because in terms of things that cause fatigue, aside of performance issues, another big one is all the small, tedious tasks that don't meaningfully make my gameplay experience better. It's just
Exactly.
things I feel I need. Like unveils, for example. I have not done Jun missions and gotten my unveils, even at this point in the league. If I need something, I say, I'm going to buy 50 or 100 of the item and just spend the exalts and unveil it on the spot and get the craft that I need. Or I will have someone else craft it for me. I'm not going to go do Jun missions. I'm not going to farm it myself. There's plenty of common crafts that I'm still missing because I just haven't used them and I don't care.
I used to care, but I'm like that too now. Like I used to be like, I need to get these craft unlocks. I need to get these craft unlocks. And now I'm just like, I'll end up with like 2 quad tabs full of veiled items, and I'll be looking at them and looking at them and looking at them, and then I'll drag them to the end of my stash and just forget that they exist. And just
then
never done. They just sit there. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that.
Speaking of dragging tabs to the end of your chest, stash tab management and setting up stash tabs is a big factor of fatigue for me. I know that in theory I could set up my stash tabs in the parent league so that that stash tab layout gets copied whenever a new league starts. Like if I go into permanent HCSSF. Huh?
Have you not done that?
No, I haven't done that. I was too late.
I did that immediately. It was one of the first things I did when they added that.
Yeah, I should probably do that.
Yeah. Yeah, you should do that immediately because you'll never have to deal with that fatigue again.
Yeah, but still. Yeah. I know, yeah. I should probably do that, but there was another little thing that annoys me about that, and that's I have a very loose trigger finger. Like, by clicking many hundreds of thousands of times with my right middle finger, I'm at the point where I occasionally, about 3 to 5 times per minute, will click the right mouse button without intending to do so. So while I go through my stash tabs and I randomly click stash tabs to get brought to the front, because that is a feature that they implemented, that you can right-click a stash tab on the list and get sent all the way to the front of your stash tab list. And you can't switch it off. And once you have set up your order of stash tabs, you don't want to change the order anymore. But like you randomly accidentally click it and it goes all the way in the front. And then you have to manually drag it all the way into the back again. If that's where you wanted to have the tab. And I feel like, why is there no lock stash tabs? They can't balance around that. But they can allow me to disable the feature. Just like they should allow me to disable the tutorial feature and the pop-ups.
They'll implement the lock button next stream, but it'll only lock some stash tabs.
It only locks regular stash tabs. Not premium or specialty.
No, it only locks premium, not regular ones. Otherwise, it's not pay to win enough. Yeah, those are things that frustrate a little. Sure, I could think of other things, but those are the most pressing issues for me as well. Is there anything that you still want to add to that list?
So, I'm a little mixed on this one.
We're actually overlapping already. We were in the question, what can GGG do to prevent? And since GGG didn't do it, you already said, what can players do? And it's like not interact with the unveils.
Yeah, and this is kind of in that category as well. But Delve. I really hate having to go through the low levels of Delve. League after league after league. I get why it's there, to keep someone from just going straight down to 1,000 and getting blasted and not understanding why they are dying or what they can do. I don't think it should just be a slider, but I wish there was some sort of progress system that would allow me to skip the boring part, because the first 200 or so depth feels completely pointless, irrelevant, and like a waste of my time. And it takes so much longer than white maps. If I really want to just skip white maps, I can do probably 20 white maps, and then I'm into yellows.
Yep.
But I can't do that with Delve. Let's just say Winged Sulfite Scarab. When you use it, you gain 10 Delve depth up to eye level 83. Or something like that. I don't care how much it costs. Just let me skip that boring part.
Yeah, let Nico offer a challenge where you could get to skip 50 delve depth if you prove yourself worthy by, doing
Fighting
a
Crystal
certain
King.
number of fighting crystal. Yeah, why not? That's more than I wanted, but
like the first time you do a yellow daily mission, it could pump you up to like depth monster level 73 or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
true.
First time you do a red daily, you could jump to 78. And
That's
at
a good
least
point.
if you had to start from there, it would be, at least you're at 78. You're not quite at the tier 16s, but you haven't done any delving yet.
What's
So if you jump in,
78?
you're
It's
at
like
least
140,
at red
right? 140, 150.
Yeah, and I wouldn't hate that. The only reason I haven't delved this league is I didn't want to redo the grind of getting down past the irrelevant stuff. And who knows, maybe that system could be extended, where when you, let's just say, do a tier 19 map, maybe you skip all the way down to 300. Because most people, if you're doing a tier 19 map, you are prepared for delve depth 300. A tier 19 map's way harder.
Yeah.
Tier 19 map's probably more like 600. Maybe not quite, maybe like 500. But it's enough that it can be a test of your build can do this versus your build can't do this. And then that still leaves the progression down further where the costs and profits really start to scale.
Yeah. And you don't want to like skip too far down. Like you don't want to wait to skip to like 1,000 depth, even if your character can handle it.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing that content, but
yeah, and I think 300-ish is a good middle ground of it doesn't take much investment to get there, but it skips most of the boring part, and so it feels a lot better to then progress into the 500s, the 800s, 1000, and so on.
Yeah.
Although I think it's fair to say that's much less frustrating, or at least for me, from my subjective point of view, after having done it in Badger's private league, where I kind of postponed delve to the very end, and on the last day I went from just about delve depth 100 to 325. It was really fast, but that was with the support of the team and with like basically endless sulfite rotations that were already happening that I didn't need to fight for or something like that. And it didn't need to chip in if I didn't want to, right? I could have just leeched sulfite because it was in the team's best interest to give me sulfite so I could get the delve depth for the points. So it was a little bit easier than to do that in the trade league, I suppose. But yeah, still, it was a couple of hours, basically one day invested of gameplay that I needed to get to that delve depth.
Yeah, and it might seem like a minor complaint, but even that one day of gameplay is more than I can tolerate with boring content like that. It's not about the sulfite itself.
Well, I mean, you probably start doing that though once the character is set up and once you're already in the high content. I feel like if you were setting up as you go along, the content would still be challenging, possibly.
With the acceleration of trade league gear, not really.
I'm ready for depth like 200 the moment I hit maps.
Yeah.
Like without even doing any trade, you can do depth 200 the moment you put in your first white map. Everything before that is literally nothing.
All right.
And in terms of a sulfite, it's not even worth it to do rotas. It's just better to straight buy the scarabs.
Yeah. Rotas was good in the Badger League we were doing because we didn't really have access to an unlimited amount of scarabs between the few people that were playing on each team. So rotas became the way to go, but you don't do those, and rotas don't exist in softcore anymore.
Not at all?
It's so cheap. No, it's just way too cheap to buy the scarabs and just run your own.
Yep, the amount of time you lose doing the rota is so much worse.
Yeah, and there's also these little things that you need to pay attention to in the rota that I learned for the first time because I've never done any rotations, where people are not supposed to move before everyone's loaded into the zone because otherwise it might impact the amount of sulfite on nearby nodes.
Yep.
And then everyone needs to be nearby when it's being clicked, and it's so much coordination necessary for good group play.
And even just that first one, I can probably get all the sulfite I need from a Toxic Sewer or an Atoll map before the last person has loaded into their map if the last person does not have an SSD. I'm done. I'm on to the next map, and nobody has moved in that rota.
Yeah. That is definitely a thing.
Yeah. But those would be the most pressing issues, I think. Honestly, I have some more things that always come to mind while playing, but right now, not so much. I think we mentioned the most important things. Oh, and we're also 2 hours and almost, well, 2.5 hours into the podcast. So I think
Funny,
it
it
would
only
be...
feels like 2 hours.
Yeah. I can imagine. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yep.
I think the joke there was that I was half an hour late.
I got that one. I just wanted to cover you up. Wanted to play along. You ruined it. But yeah. No, that was great. Is there anything that you still want to say? Is there any topics that you felt would be addressed that we didn't touch upon at all? Maybe Tenkiei had something in mind?
One thing that relates to fatigue and league mechanics, actually, I do think that league mechanics and how they function has a very big impact on fatigue. This will vary from person to person, but for a lot of people, for example, they got very burnt out of Incursion League because Incursion League seemed like it was new and full of potential and really interesting. But once you did it a couple times, it didn't actually functionally change. It was very binary. Do you get good temple room? Cool. You get rewards and you feel like it's worth your time. Do you not get good temple room? Oh, well, that's kind of boring. Let's just skip it. When league mechanics are random enough or engaging enough in and of themselves, it drives people to stay within the league longer. Whereas when mechanics tend to be much more binary, and I think even a mechanic that you might not initially think of as binary can be broken down that way for a lot of players, like Heist. Heist is kind of, you are abusing blueprints or you are not abusing blueprints. And if you're not abusing blueprints or contracts or whatever, if you're not min-maxing it, if you will, it ends up feeling very much like a slower paced map where it's this very binary gameplay of wait for door, is door open, go through, kill enemies. If not, wait for door again.
Yep, that sounds
Whereas
about right.
Legion, personally, I didn't like Legion much. I found it very boring because it's just breach. Legion feels more engaging to people because you feel like you're interacting with these enemies, you're getting to kill the generals, you're getting rewards from each Legion and everything. It could have that exalt drop. There's that feeling of there could be something good that drives the engagement beyond the very base level mechanic, which it's just breach.
So how does ritual stand in that? Like, where does ritual stand in that way of thinking? Is it binary? Because either you get a good drop or not, or...
I think it's the Legion aspect where on its face it might seem binary, but there's enough choice in what you get where you feel like you get something that's worth your time to do it for most people, from a lot of them. You know, you see that, oh, that's 2 Chaos Orbs. Well, hey, I can use 2 Chaos Orbs. Oh, that's 10 Chaos Orbs. That's cool. That's worth my time. You're also killing monsters. The monsters have drops. The monsters spawn at a fairly fast-paced rate, so you get to engage with your build. So I would say it's a good league mechanic, and it drives engagement.
That seems fair. I think Ritual's a very unimpactful league, but I think it's also perfectly placed because the main focus has been on the expansion.
Yeah.
It's just not in my face enough to be annoying, even if it was bad. And it's not really bad. It's pretty decent, but just not huge. And in the perfect position. Like if it was a solo league on its own with no expansion, we would be complaining about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And that was kind of a problem with Blight League, I feel. That Blight League came as a solo league on its own, and Blight as a mechanic would have been a lot better as a league alongside an expansion.
Yeah.
Well, with Blight, you also had the blighted maps, and you had hints at a mob at a boss that never was implemented, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if those things would have been there, it would have been maybe more of a standalone league, potentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, a good league needs to hit certain things, and having end game encounter, something for bossing, and having some sort of crafting interaction, and having a farming mechanic with good returns, potentially at least, are a few of those points for me, or maybe the core points even for most people. Like if those are met, then it's a good league.
I think that the more optional one would probably be the boss aspect, because a lot of people just don't like bossing and don't do bosses much. Then a good example of this would be Oshabi as a boss is largely irrelevant and kind of always has been.
Yep.
Where if Oshabi was never part of Harvest as a boss, the league would be virtually unchanged. Whereas something like Cortex being the end boss for Synthesis was really good. It gave you a reason to push for bosses. It had rewards that were worthwhile, and it was an engaging and, in my opinion, really well done fight.
Oh, I miss
I'll agree.
Synthesis. Yeah, but Oshabi is in itself, in herself, like she's a pretty intriguing fight. I mean, there's some bullshit that happens, but with some adjustments.
No, it's a really good fight. I quite like it. It's got literally no purpose. In fact, having Oshabi show up is like a letdown. You're excited about your harvest garden. You go in, and then you're like, wait, there's no gardens on this side. Wait, there's no. Oh no, it's Oshabi.
Yup.
Yeah.
I fucking wasted garden.
Yeah.
Like Katarina on release. Katarina on release was actively detrimental to do.
You could argue it still is.
Yeah. Most people would still say not doing Katarina because I don't want to set up my board again.
Yeah.
But there is the option now to not even bother with setting up your board and to just work to Katarina, and then it's sort of worth to do her.
Yeah, before Atlas passives, I would say it definitely was still detrimental. With Atlas passives, if you're using a really targeted, well set up board, it's definitely detrimental. If you're not, if you're just, I put the people generally where I like them, because of the lower board interaction passives that you can use to farm Katarina, it's worth farming Katarina now.
Let's set that as a goal.
Ashabi's a super easy fix, though.
Just give her
make
the
it
drops.
so that when you kill Ashabi, you get a fully stacked garden that you can then harvest afterwards. Like killing her spawns a garden, but not just 2 or 3 dual plots around the place like you normally get, but rather 8 of them.
Yeah, and maybe
plots everywhere.
Maybe something like a higher level seed guaranteed in each plot too.
Yeah, like 1 tier 4 in every plot or something.
Yep.
And you still have to pick, and you only get so many of them. You're still going to make the decisions between them, but at least killing Ashabi has a reward attached to it.
Although I feel like at that point, they might have to make the Horde crafting station double, because otherwise it will be very, very hard to store just for rewards from Ashabi.
I mean, it shouldn't have a cap to begin with, but whatever.
Well, it should have a cap, but not 10.
I mean, sure, the cap should probably be the length of a binary code bit the bit length that it would need. An irrelevantly long amount is the important part.
I feel 10 of every type would be already plenty. Like 10 adds, 10 removes, 10 add removes, and 10 of every kind that already
I guess
make it a lot better.
Depending on how much data is stored, it could get prohibitive for them if people are storing just random stuff, which I was definitely guilty of when Horde crafting stations were a thing, because it was so easy that if I wanted to store up, let's just say, 50 reforged speed, I could store 50 reforged speed and then forget about them, and they sit in my Horde crafting tab and I never use them.
Yeah.
So
But-
eliminating that, good. Capping it at 10, bad.
Yeah.
I think the problem with the cap is not wanting to go super deep into it, but I think the problem with the cap is that you have so many different crafts, and some of them shouldn't compete with each other for slots storage because they are functionally completely different.
Yeah. The other big problem of a craft is it hurts the casual player, whereas it rewards the high-end player.
No life degenerate spark myself can still, and you can still print whatever fucking item we want because you can afford to, but casuals will never ever be able to because of the 10 cap.
Yeah.
But whereas if you remove the cap, you could just, sure, I can make 2 of those items a day, but as like working class exile 1 or 2 hours a day, maybe you have to farm it for a week, but you can make your own item without having 150x if you can just hold on to all the crafts until you're ready.
Also heavily incentivized to sell the crafts immediately, which feeds into someone like me saying, oh, I'm going to buy 50 of those. Here's my exalts.
Yep.
Whereas if they were incentivized to use them, there's a lot of people who right now sell all of their crafts who would not. They would use them, which means the crafts would, well, probably be more expensive, which wouldn't be a big deal because you spend, 50x instead of 30x, and you print a 150x item instead of a 100x item. But at least people are using their crafts now.
True.
Yeah. Yeah, harvest needs to be addressed in some way. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. But that
My
stuff.
suspicion is nothing. I think they're just going to leave it.
Yeah, I worry they're just going to leave it too, and I worry what it's going to do to the game.
No. It will definitely be curious to find out, but yeah, it is a little bit troublesome, the thought that they could just leave it as is. I can't really imagine it. I mean, I couldn't really imagine that it goes core, right? And I couldn't really imagine that Heist goes core without being benched for a league. And all those things happened, so who am I to say? But yeah, as we're approaching the 3-hour mark, maybe it is a good time to round off the podcast here. You guys are very welcome to stay over here to further have a little bit of discussion about stuff. But for the recording that's available on all the audio platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on, we should do a quick introduction and end the podcast here. Tenkiei, do you maybe want to tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to hear more of your opinions and insights into specifically harvest crafting? I feel like a lot of people really benefited from some of the information you shared here.
So I am on YouTube. It's really the only platform I'm on, although I do have a Discord, which is linked in my newest YouTube video, and I should probably have that linked someplace more central, I'm now realizing. And I use the same name everywhere, so it's really easy to find me. It's my Twitch, it's my YouTube, it's my Discord, it's my Path of Exile name.
And you do live stream on YouTube every day? Or do you have fixed days?
I have a fixed stream on Tuesdays, and then I have bonus streams based on when I have time. So every Tuesday, starting around 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, or 8 GMT, is when I'll be live streaming. Then I have a few others, depending on the week. If I have a lot of video editing to do, maybe it'll just be the one. If I don't have much to do, maybe it'll be 2 or 3.
That's great. Really only one? Oh, okay, well. I almost thought I see you almost every time I look. There's a new stream that you've streamed at some point. But yeah, that's great. Balor, what are your plans for the immediate future? People may already know where you are, but what can they be hyped to see from you?
So I am currently trying to fundamentally rework the entire way people do guides. So my focus of most of the next month is going to be to entirely restructure how League Start guides work. I think they've been done wrong by everyone, including me. So my goal is to fix that, and that's what I'm going to be doing for the next month straight. It's
What did people do wrong? You want to quickly explain that?
I don't want to go too far into it because it'll take too long. But the basic premise is people are picking League Start builds based on suggestions from content creators, but we're not asking the single most important question, which is how long does it take you to get to the end game? How long before you are doing tier 15, tier 16 maps? Because that is the most important question when picking a build to go with it. Because certain builds, like my low life Golemancer that I league started as, is a fantastic league start if you're a day one player. If you get to tier 15, tier 16 maps in day one, fantastic. If you get there on day 5, it is not affordable. It's not a good league start, way too expensive. And then you go the other way, like the Dominating Blow build that I've got is an absolutely fantastic day 3 or day 5 person. If you're getting to end game in by day 3 or day 5 of a league or any time after that, it's fantastic. But if I was to try and league start as a day 1 player, trash build, can't get there, can't do it, not worth it. The things it needs don't exist. And I think that's the most important question, and no one's ever asked it before. And I think that needs to be a prominent part in build guides, to have people making the correct decisions for their level of play, not based on how strong other people are.
That is very insightful and a shift of perspective for my the way I look at build guides now. I can't wait to see that become implemented in the build guide meta for Path of Exile. People get a little bit more information in which situation a build would be good for starting and in which it would be bad, potentially.
Yeah. I make a few build guides. I wouldn't say I really focus my build guides on League Start, though, because my guides are heavily endgame focused. That's the aspect of the game I enjoy. That's where I'm
absolutely.
Yeah, that's where I'm most knowledgeable.
It's League Starts, really.
Yeah. And so usually what I do is I specifically don't make League Start guides because I know I won't be able to do a good job with it because, well, perfect example of this. People have asked me, what did you do on League Start for leveling your Purifying Flame Miner? I played Poison Blade Vortex Assassin. For me, that is totally fine because I knew Poison Blade Vortex Assassin, I knew what I'd have to respec, I knew how to get the gear. But for a lot of people, that's going to be prohibitively expensive to start as one thing and then completely shift like that. And so that's why I don't consider my guides League Start appropriate. If people want to League Start them, a lot of the builds do work for League Start. I think you can League Start Purifying Flame Mine. You can League Start Poison Blade, Fall Blade, Blast Assassin. That's just not the focus of my content.
Yeah. It's fine. That's great. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of it around, and I'm super good. Like, I don't have any of that information in any of my guides. Like, I don't have anything listed as how long it should take you to get to red maps if you want to pick this build. It's not listed anyway. No one does that.
Yeah, no.
But,
and guides. Okay, so
should.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do guides wrong. Another really, really big thing is, if you are trying to sell someone that it is a budget build, that if this is the budget is the main selling point of why you should play it, you should not showcase gameplay outside of that budget. And
yep, absolutely.
Yeah. It's why when the last time I did a build that was specifically this is budget, I made sure I had gameplay. You know, with a Poison Blade, Fall Blade, Blast Assassin, it can be played on a budget. The focus of the guide was not necessarily budget, but I have the gameplay going back from, week 1. This was my budget version. This is how it played. You can see all that. This was me doing the Feared on a reasonably budget version. Then later, this is the showcase version where here's my full gear. I've spent over 100x on this. Watch it just blast stuff.
Yep.
But a lot of people don't separate that because the endgame version footage looks a lot better. It's
Obviously.
it's also really hard to put together a separate budget gear set. I've run into that in the past. So for another guide that I did that was on a Tech Slam Chieftain, what I did is I literally unequipped certain items. I took off gem links and I took off items so that my health and my damage would be roughly the same as the budget version, and used that as an approximation of fighting Cirrus. This is what it looks like when you have half the damage of the full version and about 1,000 less life.
Yeah. That's how I practiced for Uber Ziri when I did that a year ago or so in Standard. I ran normal at Ziris, but I took out links and I took out survivability so that I would still get one shot by all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll personally be spending my time this coming week, practicing up for the gauntlet that is being hosted by Zizran again, this time a class-based gauntlet. And I'm very determined to perform better than in my previous gauntlet this time, so I definitely need to get back into practice, especially after indulging in softcore and dying over 100 times during the last week, which was fun, but I now will get back into a hardcore mindset and hopefully even into a gauntlet mindset. What's cool about the gauntlet this time is that they decided to do only -20 instead of -40 resist, which opens up the build possibilities quite a bit, and even for the strongest builds, it does make a difference when your freedom in gearing is that much better. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're doing there, and that's what you can see me doing on on all the content that I'm doing. But that sums it up about right. I think, if no one wants to add anything. What I want to add before we end is I really want to thank Tenkiei for coming on. It was very good and insightful to have you on the podcast. I'm sure this is not the last time that we see you on here.
I was happy to come on. I enjoyed it a lot, and it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, likewise. And next episode of Faded Connections, everyone, will be on the 20th of February. That's 1 week into the gauntlet. I think the gauntlet will be still running. So we won't have any guests that are participating in the gauntlet at that point, but maybe we'll have some people who can talk a little bit about the gauntlet on the next episode after that. But as usual, we'll announce the guests somewhere in the week leading up to that next episode. And for those of you who missed the beginning of the episode, you can always find it in full as video on BalorMage's YouTube, as well as on all the podcasting platforms. So that said, everyone have a good week, and I'll wish you the best of success in whatever you're doing. If you're practicing for the gauntlet, try to die not as much as a certain blue-haired broadcaster. And have a good one. Bye-bye.